All right, I think we'll get started now. So, welcome everyone. It's great to have you here. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jocelyn Weber Phipps, and I have the pleasure of being the Deputy Director for the Berkeley Center for Responsible Decentralized Intelligence. And for short, we call that Berkeley RDI. It's quite a mouthful otherwise. And I also have the pleasure of being the founding director for the Berkeley Blockchain Xcelerator that we launched in January of 2019. So it's now the 5-year anniversary of our accelerator. So we're really quite proud of that. We wanted to put this forum together to bring together the SF Bay Area community that is working on so many fabulous blockchain projects and tie them into what is going on at Berkeley, because we have so much underway here that we'll talk about in a few minutes. And then also highlight and showcase our accelerator teams for this year, for 2024. We also want to celebrate and explore all the latest innovations in blockchain. So you'll hear that today in the panels. And at the very end, we'll showcase our accelerator teams. You'll also hear from a Berkeley blockchain project that's come out of one of our research labs. And you'll also hear from some of our frontier research fellows that we have at Berkeley RDI. So we selected 15 research fellows in January, and you'll have a chance to meet some of them as well. The agenda today, we're really fortunate to have 4 panels with technology leaders from TradeFi, also from the emerging landscape in blockchain, and a keynote by Juan Benet. And we'll follow that up with the section that I talked about on the Accelerator Demo Day. Right now, I'd like to turn it over to one of our faculty co-directors, Professor John Song, and she will tell you a little bit about Berkeley RDI. So please join me in welcoming Professor John Song. Thank you.
Okay, great. So, yes, thanks a lot. So I'll just say briefly a few words about Berkeley RDI. So the Berkeley Center for Responsible Decentralized Intelligence is a campus-wide center for innovation in the decentralization space. And it has its mission as to advance the science and technology of decentralization and decentralized intelligence to make it universally accessible and empower a responsible digital economy. And as a campus-wide center, the center spans across campus, including multiple different departments and schools, including School of Engineering, EECS, and Haas Business School, where Christine is a faculty and also a co-director of the center, and also the Berkeley Law School, and a number of other institutions. And Berkeley RDI builds on a strong foundation. So Berkeley has been recognized as, of course, #1 university. And also, in particular, Berkeley is the #1 US university in blockchain for the last 2 years. And also, Berkeley ranks #1 in many programs, including computer science graduate programs. And Berkeley RDI is very unique in the sense that it has 3 key pillars: research, education, community, and entrepreneurship. So for research, RDI as, again, interdisciplinary research center has many faculty affiliated across campus and also has affiliate faculty from other universities as well. And the research is broad-ranging, including, for example, decentralized finance, cryptography, such as zero-knowledge proofs, metaverse, scalability, and also decentralization and AI, and so on. So Berkeley RDI has been really productive, has published more than 20 research papers in top conferences in the last 2 years. And also this year, we have announced, so Berkeley RDI is supporting 15 RDI Frontier Research Fellows. And at the end of the event today, you will also be able to hear some lightning talks from some of these Frontier Research Fellows. And so that's the first pillar, research. This research has had actually has made a lot of impact in practice in the blockchain and Web3 space. And the second pillar is in education, where Berkeley IDI has led a number of really high impact MOOCs in cutting edge topics. So the first one, so Berkeley IDI has launched the world's first MOOC, this massive open online course in decentralized finance. And for the first MOOC, it actually had, besides having hundreds of Berkeley students, it also had more than 10,000 students joining online globally. And we had, and the MOOC class has more than 180,000 lecture views. And also actually many students have gotten an NFT for their certificate for the class as well. And RDI also launched the first entrepreneurship in Web3 MOOC as well, with over 1,600, again, participants joining online globally from over many countries, and also hundreds of Berkeley students as well. And another really successful MOOC that Berkeley RDI has launched is the Zero Knowledge Proof, also the first ever Zero Knowledge Proof MOOC as well, which also has been really greatly received, with hundreds of thousands of lecture views online, and over thousands of participants online as well. And the ZKP MOOC also has a ZKP hackathon that jointly launched together. And the ZKP hackathon also has many hundreds of participants online from 150 teams, and also from many countries joining as well. And most recently, we've also done a new course on decentralized intelligence and large language models as well. So that's the second pillar, education. And the third pillar of RDI is community and entrepreneurship. At Berkeley, we have a vibrant ecosystem and community at Berkeley. So the RDI is a campus-wide innovation center, and also we have great student clubs on campus as well, including Blockchain at Berkeley Student Club, which really has a long history. It's one of the first student club in blockchain space, actually in the world, and also has been the most active student blockchain organizations in the ecosystem. And they've done a lot of really great things. And later on, you'll actually hear a little bit more from the presidents from the club as well. And also there are other student clubs that are very active on campus as well, including blockchain law and has fintech and blockchain clubs also. And also blockchain, the ecosystem at Berkeley has a great alum network as well, with over $1 billion raised in startups from Berkeley alums. And also, so today is the blockchain Berkeley Xcelerator demo day. So the right, I think Jocelyn will briefly say a few words about this.
Yeah, so you'll be hearing from all of our teams, but just to give you a little bit of background on the Xcelerator. This was launched in January of 2019, as I mentioned, and since that time, we've worked with 110 teams from around the world that have went on to raise $650 million in follow-on funding. And we pair these teams with fellows from Blockchain at Berkeley, who you'll hear from later today. And, you know, it's a non-dilutive accelerator. It's part of our academic mission, and we invite anyone to join, no Berkeley affiliation required. And we've had over almost 2,000 teams apply since we launched this in January of 2019. and we've only selected 110 so far. So we had a chance to be very selective. 2 years ago, we had over 400 teams apply. So it ebbs and flows a little bit with the industry, but it's really been a great program. It's been about education and opportunity creation for our students and the entrepreneurs that join us. So it really fulfills our mission in this area of community and entrepreneurship for the Center of RDI. So I think with that, we can, I also wanted to highlight that for Berkeley RDI, we also do a number of events. In August of 23, before the Science of Blockchain conference, we hosted a very large conference on campus with 3,000 people registered and over 1,000 people attending on decentralization and AI and computing, what the future of that looked like. And we brought together people from the AI world and the blockchain world to talk about how those technologies may work together to create a better future for AI. So this was a very popular conference that was held in the Poly Ballrooms last August 23rd. And you can see that we've been doing a lot of these types of conferences over the last 2.5 years since RDI's launch. And that helps unite our ecosystem and the broader ecosystem in the Bay Area, as well as the universities that we collaborate with globally. So I think just to point out some things that are next, for our students, we have a certificate program in RDI, and you can see that on our website under academics. We also will be doing Funding the Commons. We are a partner for that. That is tomorrow and Sunday here at the Brower Center. That supports open source development in the web, in next generation of the internet and AI. And we are co-organizers of the Science of Blockchain conference that will be held in August, early August in New York City. So we hope that all of you will attend these events as well. So with that, I'd like to go to the next panel, but my slide clicker is not working. Oh, there we go. Oh, too far. Yeah. So I'd like to welcome up our panelists for the technology frontiers in blockchain. So today we're very pleased to be joined by Avery Ching of Aptos, Jeremy Clover of Circle, as well as Mahdi Zamani of Visa. So thank you all for being here. Professor John Song will moderate this panel. And we really appreciate these technology leaders joining us and sharing these insights with us. We look forward to hearing.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a really exciting panel on technology. So we'll just quickly do some intro. Maybe each of you can just briefly introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. I'm Avery Ching, CTO and co-founder at Aptos Labs. I worked at Meta for a decade before this on data infrastructure, and then the last 3 years on blockchain. For those of you who've heard about the Libra project, I was the tech lead for that, and we're really excited to see that technology make its way through into Aptos. Great to meet you all.
I'm Jeremy Clover. I'm the VP of Engineering, or a VP of Engineering over at Circle, and I support the data teams, so that's data science, data engineering, and data platform. I was also at Meta for 10 years. I was in the reality labs and artificial intelligence side of Meta, but very familiar with Libra.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mahdi Zamani. I'm the Director of Cryptography Solutions team at Visa. I've been with Visa for about 7 years now. And initially, I was part of Visa Research, leading a team of researchers working on digital currency at Visa. And more recently, I switched to the product team, working on some of the new initiatives at Visa, including tokenization, that I will hopefully talk about more later.
Great, great. Thank you. So yeah, let's get started. So the first question is, so there has been an explosive interest in blockchain, and there's a lot of new and exciting technological innovations. So the first question is, so what are the technological innovations that you and your organization are most excited about and believe that has the potential for the biggest impact broadly in industry?
I'll start with this one then. I'll try to keep it not too long because there's a lot I'm really excited about. But I guess getting started, how many of you have used a wallet today with blockchain? Oh, this is fantastic, all of you almost. So if you've used it, I think you would all recognize probably it's not something that's ready to hand to your mom, your sister, your brother who may be non-technical and who's not familiar with how to secure a mnemonic or other kind of funds of that nature. And so what we've been really excited about is providing kind of very much Web 2-based solutions for Web 3 technology at Aptos. So a couple of things, earlier Don talked about zero-knowledge proofs, for example, and why those are transformative. They're transformative definitely for how we scale L2s. They're also transformative for the security and privacy properties. One thing we've also been using though is if you want to log into your account, like say with a Google login or any other kind of OpenID provider, we've been able to kind of generate zero-knowledge proofs that can tie to a blockchain account on the back end. And this means that how you log into today's internet websites, just 2 clicks, can be applied to that blockchain-based technology. And that's really exciting for onboarding the 5 billion internet users into crypto. Another thing we've been excited about is the idea of using passkeys. So many of you log into your phone with Face ID, Touch ID. By being able to add those WebAuthn signatures into the blockchain and support them natively, you can have a transaction that is signed by staring at your phone or log into your account that way as well. And so these kind of technologies, I think, we're super excited about how they can kind of bring the masses into blockchain. Other things is secure on-chain randomness is a very interesting problem. How do you kind of generate a random number? Very hard in computer science, right? That's something you can actually do with the blockchain, kind of secure by the same proof-of-stake guarantees you have regarding safety and liveness. And finally, I think the last set of challenges we're really excited about is the advancements we made with respect to scalability and latency on the Aptos blockchain using a parallelized and pipeline stack. And being able to support today kind of end-to-end, say 25,000 plus transactions per second in a mainnet-like setting. We have Visa here, so Visa does 150 million transactions a day. So 13 times what Visa can do in a blockchain. We're really excited about the fact that now these transactions can happen in a on-chain way instantly with instant finality. So a lot of exciting things happening. I think we're really at that cusp where blockchain infrastructure is getting to the point where it can be adopted by billions of people. And we've got to make sure that we kind of keep pushing forward with the adoption piece, getting ecosystem involved, getting large enterprises like the ones here involved to help push that to a larger set of people.
I would say similarly, what we're doing at Circle, a lot of it is removing friction for developers. I mean, if you're a developer in the blockchain world and you are trying to write an application that interacts with a blockchain or even a number of blockchains, it ain't easy right now. It's a very difficult process. So there's definitely the consumer side, which there's tons of friction. Very similarly, trying to explain to my family how to set up a MetaMask wallet and why it's important to do that and how to secure it, and then they very quickly go and save the seed key and 1Password, and 1Password gets hacked, and they're gone, right? We've lost them as a customer in crypto. So it's really about how do you remove friction, how do you make it easy for regular people to use, for people who aren't the early adopters, and then how do you help that scale? That's absolutely something that we're doing. We're developing a lot of SDKs, a lot of very simple installs for developers so they can hit the ground running here. I think the other thing I'm excited about is a little bit more personal to my function, which is data science and data, which is the blockchain is incredibly transparent, and you get to see everything that goes on there. All you have to do is know how to read it. And so there's an amazing amount of information out there over how people are using it, how funds are being used, how applications are being used, that really gives us a lot of insight into where this ecosystem is going in the direction of this ecosystem. A lot of it right now is trading, but you're starting to see these forays into new areas like social with Warpcaster and Farcaster and Friend.tech. And so for us, it's amazing to be able to have almost in real time your finger on the pulse of innovation and watch it evolve very, very specifically and see what people are attracted to and what products have product market fit, what products don't have product market fit, and how that scales over time. It's really a fascinating world to be in from the data point of view. So I think that's the other thing we're excited about is the transparency and the visibility that we get into the ecosystem.
Thank you, Jeremy. So on the Visa side, as a traditional finance technology company, we have a lot of partners, like a lot of banks that today, as issuers and acquirers, we process their transactions, So this was a very natural question for us, that how we can be supportive of this community as much as possible. And one of the areas that has got a lot of traction lately is the tokenization. You guys probably have heard about it, that especially what we call like the TradFi, those entities or parties that were very active in the traditional finance world, now wanted to bring their assets and liabilities on the blockchains. Banks, commercial banks, we hear quite a lot. Our partners are interested to bring their commercial bank money, or what we call also the bank liability, their deposits, tokenize them on the blockchain. Central banks, from many years ago, they've started, a lot of central banks have shown interest in that as well. And this is an area that we feel that it's, because of the way that technology got evolved, is a lot of fragmentation exists. Different network providers, layer 1s, layer 2 providers, and this is also, has become a big challenge for this new ecosystem, because one of the main reasons that I think the community has been interested in tokenization is to be interoperate with other systems, and that's one of the beauties of tokens. Tokens, once you bring an asset or a deposit into a blockchain, that allows you to seamlessly use it in different finance applications and cut some of those overheads that exist from legal expenses, bureaucracy, and the settlement issues, the delays, they're not available over the weekend. So this is an area that we wanted to focus on and leverage and see how we can really bring those benefits that blockchain bring to this ecosystem. And tokenization in particular is an area that we feel that needs a lot of these connections across different networks. And as Visa, a company that has excelled over the years, decades, on connecting different networks that banks have with their deposits, central banks with their central bank money, we've been always able to connect them seamlessly and allow to be everywhere, to use our cards everywhere to make payments. This is an area that we wanted to also do. Of course, we don't want to centralize things. We wanted to adapt ourselves to the fundamentals of this area, which is that how we can play a role of a trustless entity in this domain. And one of them is, of course, how we can bridge between these networks in a very trustless way without having those limitations that exist in the bridges in the blockchain area.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So yes, our esteemed panelists have shared a lot about exciting technological innovations. And so now let's dive in a little bit deeper. So following Magdi, what you talked about in terms of the use cases at Visa. So there are a couple of follow-on questions. So one, when you talk about tokenization and talk about the use case at Visa, so what's Visa's perspective in terms of using private versus public blockchains?
That's a very good question. So we feel that both of them will exist, and they need to coexist and work with each other. Some of our partners, and what I'm saying is pretty much based on what we've heard, is that they're interested to have these partitions very isolated because of lack of the privacy, and the expenses that privacy-preserving technology has over the blockchain. They wanted to isolate themselves in separate networks. And on the other hand, we've seen a lot of banks that are interested in stablecoins. There's been a huge amount of money, USDC, for example, a lot of successful networks, and these partners are asking that how we can launch our own, stablecoins. We have assets. We wanted to bring in some of those make them some stablecoins on the blockchain, and invest in, say, startups or different, places that need, fast and easy access to money, the assets that the bank has. So I would say both of them will coexist, and depending on how much the technology makes progress, especially privacy, because it is not just something we can say we prefer public blockchain over private blockchain. Regulations don't let banks to put their, especially deposits of customers, on public chains. The way that they exist, Bank Secrecy Act, GBRI, there are several privacy regulations that do not allow banks to put those information on the blockchain. So that's one of the areas that we feel that we need to work a lot on privacy-preserving tokenization and to be able to, over time, bring these tokens into public chain. The reason is that the overhead of deploying a new blockchain, a private blockchain, it will cause fragmentation. Bridging across these networks has its own costs. But unfortunately, the privacy technology has not there been yet to be able to launch all of these with the requirements that these commercial banks have on public chains.
Great, thank you. And then with that, can you also talk a little bit, what do you think as the remaining challenges for, in order to fulfill the use case that you mentioned?
So on the privacy side, we've been experimenting quite a lot. One of the very early works in privacy that we did jointly with Stanford was Zether, a confidential token mechanism on Ethereum, how we can have this homomorphic encryption, if you guys are familiar with, be used in order to keep the balances of these ERC20 tokens on the blockchain completely confidential. So this is an area that initially was interesting. We got some progress, but things are not at a level that a mainstream payment provider like Visa can really do these zero-knowledge proofs at the rate that they can be done today to really take this into the market, to a huge market that exists for these tokens right now. So I would say, from a technology perspective, the main thing for us is to focus on how we can bring this overhead of zero-knowledge proof generation and verification. Of course, verification usually with ZK snarks are fast. We can do it on the blockchain verification, but the proof time is usually high, and we do not have enough players that can assist clients, for example, in generating these proofs as they're making transactions on the blockchain. So I would say these are the main areas that I think in the research and technology we need to focus on next.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So next, let's move on to Jeremy from Circle. Circle has really done a lot of really great development and helping developers to build further as well. So first, can you share what are the key technical lessons that you have learned in doing development at Circle that you can share with developers? And also, in your opinion, what are the current pain points for developers to enter into the Web3 and blockchain space?
Yeah, I'll start with the second one first, which the pain points is really, if you're going to be working with blockchains, they all work differently, right? So you have to have different types of understanding, different types of integration, different types of languages to work with any one of these blockchains, and they all have different shortcomings. Some are faster than others, some are more expensive than others. And so I think what we've been able to try to do is really create an abstraction layer between developers and these blockchains so that they can very easily, the hope is we create a suite of tools that allow developers to very easily do this, and as part of those suite of tools, they can get USDC, which is our primary product, which is the stable coin, so then now you can transact in your application very easily and you can move capital back and forth. I think the biggest thing is time to market, especially with, so much has happened since COVID with the way that development is starting to work and the way that you're seeing these companies being funded. People are doing more with less. And so particularly with the advancements we're seeing in like artificial intelligence and how people can use artificial intelligence to accelerate their development process, like the name of the game is make it easy and make it fast for everyone right now. And that's what AI does as a tool, and that's what we're trying to provide for developers and consumers, is just make it very easy so that people cannot think too much about spending months and months and months on the code and really start to iterate and test those hypotheses quickly. So that's what we want to bring to the developer market. What was the first part of the question again?
What are the key technical lessons that you have learned?
Oh gosh, yeah. So technical lessons. So my technical lessons are a little bit more again on the the blockchain ingestion side. It's difficult. It's difficult to do these things at scale consistently. Like we want to be able to look at, for example, on any given day, what are the balances that wallets are holding. To be able to do that, to be able to aggregate that data, to be able to process that data and scale is very hard. There is a ton of blockchain data out there. And it is just order of magnitude over the last couple of months accelerated based on what we're seeing with, I don't know if any of you are out there in that, the meme coin frenzy that was going on. There's just a lot of transactions now, and kind of moving through those transactions is difficult for several technical reasons. Like, one of them is the scale of the data set. You know, we know how to work with big data, but the way that this data is processed is very different, and it varies chain by chain. Sometimes you can pull things like balances directly out of the chain. Sometimes the balance only exists as an aggregate of everything that happened up until that point. Those are very, very difficult to work with. And so for us, you know, the technical problems are really ones of understanding and monitoring scale, and how do we scale our ability to work with things that scale very quickly. And so if you're using, you know, traditional databases to parse blockchains, you've got a double problem. And so we've been fortunate enough that, you know, we use Google BigQuery right now for most of our public blockchains, and that's been scaling pretty well. But not every solution does. I mean, if you're doing custom, you know, Postgres databases, you're not going to get there. So.
Great, thanks. Yeah, this I think will lead to my next question as well. So yeah, so you talked about transparency, you know, getting information on chain, and also the scale of the data. So as I understand, at Circle also you have a big data team as well. So can you talk a little bit, what is the role of a broader data team, including data engineering, analytics, and data science at a place like Circle?
Yeah, I mean, data engineering is really your foundation of everything. So I know there's a bunch of data scientists in here. If you are going to be joining a company that is all data scientists, you are in for some hurt. Because 90% of your time is going to be spent pre-processing, cleaning, aggregating, structuring data, and not actually doing the data science work. So really, data engineering is the foundation of what any team does, because they make sure that the data is clean, it's structured, it's usable, it's high quality, and then it allows everybody else to move very quickly off of that. For us, analytics is a little more backward-looking, like what has happened. Data science is a little more forward-looking, what could happen. So data science, we tend to focus a lot on the science part of it and not the data part, which is what are the hypotheses that we have, how do we articulate those hypotheses incredibly clearly, and then how do we make sure that that articulation is falsifiable in a way that we can test it. And so that's really what we do with data. And the things that we've been monitoring that we're really excited to watch is this kind of proliferation of use cases. Most of the use cases up until now have been trading and speculative. And we're starting to see real use cases and real consumer products. And it comes in fits and starts. Some of them are retentive, some of them aren't. Some of them have product market fit, some don't. But there's really starting to be this, this new innovation layer within things like, watching what's going on with Farcaster is pretty amazing. Watching, decentralized social in a way that a couple of years ago, you wouldn't have thought that this would have worked, but you had the friend tech thing, which kind of worked and then kind of didn't, and then you have Farcaster, and now that's working and it's kind of taking off a little bit. So for us, it's just really exciting to see the use cases go beyond the speculative, because for us, in the stablecoin side of the world, like, that means that there's new markets that are being developed. It's not necessarily about us reaching the existing markets. It's like, not only do we want to see the, our piece of the pie grow bigger, but it's great to watch the pie itself grow. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. So now let's move on to Avery from Aptos, being a layer 1 blockchain, and also one of the fastest to launch, I think. So can you also share what are the key technical lessons that you have learned in development of Aptos that you can share with the developers?
Sure. I think, I just want to say I commensurate with the challenges folks have brought up, Maddie. We've been working on things like veiled tokens, which are kind of an intermediary between fully transparent and non-transparent transactions. These transactions, the transfer amounts are hidden, but the senders are known, and senders and receivers are known. And that provides kind of hopefully a middle ground between the cost that you pay for these kind of really expensive zero-knowledge proof-based transactions and the speed that you need for public access. I think it's just mainly a factor of like 10, 20 times slower. So we can still get thousands of transactions a second, which is still pretty darn good. And we'll keep pushing the technology envelope because people really want those things to be private when they think about money moving across the world. No one wants to know I went to McDonald's for coffee every morning, for example. And I think Jeremy's point is really an underserved one. When you think about you have a very high throughput blockchain, people don't really think about the cost to indexing that blockchain. If I'm doing 30,000 transactions per second in Aptos, I might have a write amplification of 5x that, because each transaction I have to write like 5 times 5 different tables. And so now I'm really doing like 150,000 transactions per second to the database, which is brutal and like, pretty much no ingester is really ready for today. So we had to work really hard on actually supporting very highly scalable indexing solutions, not just for ourselves, but also for the customers of the blockchain. If an NAT marketplace wants to build an index and track their transactions very rapidly, they have to have a custom indexing solution that plugs into kind of a backend for ingestion. Or there's a club that actually wants to track orders in a different way. They've got to have their own custom indexing solution. So these are really interesting challenges that kind of if you're leading the space in high throughput blockchain bandwidth, you have to kind of serve these problems as well, which are not really well known at the time. The other thing I think that's really interesting for us to solve is how many of you write code? Just a quick show of hands. Okay, good, most of us. How many of you have written bug-free code? All right, so that's one of the biggest challenges right now in our smart contract space, where you've seen billions of dollars being lost to hacks, especially against bridges. And so what we spent a lot of time on is building out Move, which is a new way of kind of thinking about smart contract development, where it's very, very small set of features that can be used, but those features are very safe and very well protected behind the ownership of the signer of the objects, signer of the resources, and having the kind of primitives which control the way the minting and burning is done. You can't just arbitrarily mint resources, burn them, drop them on the floor. They have to be conserved as a part of that process. And thinking about the smart contract development phase through Move, through things like the Move Prover, which is a way to formally verify properties of your smart contract, being able to test all the scenarios without you having to write unit tests for every single one of them, we think is a massive step change in the way that we get from ideation to production for the smart contract developers, and having more applications into the field that we can trust.
Oh, great, thank you. And this leads to my next question too, which is Move. So Move as a smart contract language has a lot of advantages. So can you share a little bit in terms of how the adoption has been, and what are the challenges that you have seen in the adoption of Move?
Great question. So I think we've seen, for those of you familiar with Rust to some degree, if you've played with Rust a little bit, there is a high learning curve. It takes a bit to understand, why does my compiler keep telling me I got so many bugs in my code, not letting me actually run this and execute it. But once you get past that, you actually get much, much better productivity. And I think that's the way you should think about Move to some degree. It's going to make things, limit you in terms of what you can do. There's no dynamic dispatch today. There's no way, the easy way is to shoot yourself in the foot. But it might be a little bit different if you're coming from the Solidity background. If you're coming from the Rust background, it actually feel very natural to you. And so what we've seen is that for those that are kind of familiar with either programming in Solidity or even using other languages out there for smart contract development, it can be a little bit of a hurdle for developers to move to come onto Move. At the same time, though, those who start using it, they love it. And so we've been able to see is that the developers building on top of Aptos, there are hundreds of developers today. I think the latest Electric Capital report showed about 400 plus monthly active developers in public repos. There's a lot more building in private repos as well. They start to really enjoy the simplicity of it, the ability to use things like formal verification to have extra high assurance in their code bases, reduces the auditing costs for them. And when they deploy, they just feel a lot more confident about their code being out there and having even the ability to upgrade that code under certain constraints. And so we've been really excited to see the community building around Move in a way that's also very composable. We have something called the Move decompiler, which just recently was announced, that allows anyone to take any of the bytecode that's out there, decompile it, and understand exactly how to rewrite that smart contract, whether it's a DEX, a borrow-lend protocol, or some other kind of application out there. And so being able to, the other advantage of Move is really being the composability of it. Those modules that are deployed, they have public functions that be called. You can actually get the idea of reuse of software. We always hear about that as something great. Everyone ends up copy pasting everything in other languages. Having be able to use those libraries and see those libraries get upgraded through things like the Aptos framework, which are kind of core set of primitives for the blockchain. That framework itself is also formally verified for security properties. And so when you think about this layering of formally verified software on top of formally verified software and composability, it becomes much more realistic to imagine how that world works very safely and securely.
Great, thank you. So now this is a question for all the panelists. So as of course, the blockchain Web3 space is very exciting. There's a lot of really fast advancement. And another area, of course, everyone here is also really excited about. That's another area that has blazing speed, fast advancement, which is the area of AI. which also is really exciting, and I've been teaching a number of classes in AI as well. So one question for all the panelists, this is going to be a question for some of the other panelists, for the other panels as well, is given these two areas are very different, but both are really exciting and fast-moving, what do you think about, what's your thoughts in terms of in the space of decentralization and AI? Do you think the two has much to do with each other? There's interesting things to do in the intersection, or like just in general, what do you think about these two areas? Right. Mm-hmm.
So maybe I can go first. I think something, I'm not actively, working on AI. My expertise in decentralized systems, privacy. But one thing that I see that happened in the especially the Bitcoin world, and I think would be a good candidate for the rise of these Gen AI, GPTs and different things that we see, is that there is a huge shortage of computational power in AI. We all know that. GPTs are still slow. We can custom make them for a specific use case, but we still need them to be as smart as possible. One thing that we saw in Bitcoin was huge amount of hash power, was dedicated, the computational power to solve these, puzzles. And you'll be surprised to know that this network, after about like 15 years, 16 years from its launch, it has about 20 gigawatts of computational power being dedicated. And what we're hearing from companies like Microsoft, Facebook, the amount of computation that they're already putting is in the order of a few gigawatts. So it's still way smaller than Bitcoin. So this is a huge capacity in a decentralized network to bring that through commodity hardware, that this massive amount of computational power for Gen AI data, the training and also the inference. I think it is not necessarily that decentralized, trustless nature of that work that would play a lot here, as much as we saw in the financial, applications. But there's still these, contributions from individual, computation power providers around the world. Still, we have to make sure that they're not cheating, they're not providing malicious, inputs into these GPTs, or they're not doing something shady. And that is what we learned from blockchain space that we might be able to apply in that domain. Of course, we are very early, and I'm not active in this area, but I'm really hoping that to see part of that huge computational power that we could raise through Bitcoin network be also used not just for random, puzzle solving in proof of work, but for something useful. And that demand is, I think, in Gen AI right now.
I have a long spiel to go on here, so. Okay. AI, we think, is really, really important, especially with blockchain. So, a quick question. When you look at content on social media, how do you know whether that content's been generated, is authentic, been moderated, modified in any shape and form? It's really, really hard to tell these days, right? We see Sora, we see other great technologies out there that can make everything look very realistic. And so when we think about blockchain is a great immutable ledger that kind of shows that kind of proof of lineage, proof of authenticity, and having the only kind of way to guarantee that's, to have attestation around that content is really through signatures that can be trusted, that are signed, right? So we believe that content verification and being able to sign content that attest to what that content is, whether it's something I snapped directly from my phone, something I did modify using some LLM or some other technique, is really, really important. And we see also organizations like the C2PA starting to watermark their content to actually show this. And there are aspects in which the blockchain can really make this a lot better, because you have those keys that, if they're rotated over time, you understand that lineage of change. You have a very accurate high-performance clock, which is going to be immutable with the blockchain. And if you see derivative content, you can actually show when content came first, what content came second. And we're actually working with a number of different teams who are starting to solve these problems. People that are content providers, whether photographers, videographers, people that want to know that, if their content is being used, are they going to be paid for it? Are they going to be compensated for that? Or do they have the rights and permissions to use that content? Where are those permissions stored? Blockchain provides a very, very natural place for that. Another area besides just content verification
is going to be around the area of, I think Manny just talked about GPUs, right? There's a tremendous amount of GPU power out there. One of our partners is IO.net. They've secured 500,000 GPUs for decentralized compute. And that kind of compute power is going to be managed through infrastructure like the blockchain, where you can have payment rails for how you have the kind of provider of that hardware, the user of that hardware, and then kind of the third party, which is helping to facilitate that transfer, all taking part in the different economics. And leveraging blockchain for that is a really nice and natural solution for decentralized use of AI training or inference. And so that's another area we're really, really excited about. I think a third area that we're excited about is the area of kind of AI bots to some degree. And having today, if you want to have a trading bot or you want to have a bot that goes and executes kind of your ideas, your expectations, you don't have those kind of controls through on-chain means like you can actually transact with payments. You can transact with buying and selling NFTs, and this can actually happen on your behalf through a bot. And that bot can be then controlled with settings that are stored in the blockchain. They can transact on the blockchain, and we believe that's another very, very interesting use of AI going forward.
I think it's going to be hard to add to what's already here. My initial reaction whenever I hear like blockchain and AI, because the two tend to coexist, is it's like the pitch deck blender. It's like you just throw AI on there, throw blockchain, you'll get funded. I think I don't know is the answer for a lot of this AI stuff. I think the problem is there's a lot of exploration right now, but especially within the AI world and within the blockchain world. For anybody who's worked on this space, if you want to start getting involved in AI and in any like deep capacity at a company, you're going to be spending most of your time with lawyers. And so I think the challenge right now is that there's no clarity over what you can and you can't do and what will and won't be allowed. And so there's a lot of risk aversion when people want to go into this space and figure out like, okay, how can we tack on AI? And I think the signal that we're going to be looking for, at least internally, when we think about AI, particularly on the blockchain, is what does this do? What does the blockchain do natively better than can be done in private systems? And I think you really touched on it, which is anything that has sequential dependencies. That is where the blockchain will do it. So I think when it comes to proof of ownership, proof of lineage, that's where it's going to be, but it's going to be all the back-end work. I don't think you're going to see a lot of hosting of large language models on the blockchain. Like, it just ain't going to happen. Or training. And then the other thing I think is like the governance layer of how do you, I think there's a cool project out there that's called Akash Network. And it's like, okay, how do you have distributed compute where you can like compensate those people using almost like a token system, so where people can put requests, so it's a decentralized AWS. So you may see systems like that where there's like a tokenization that can reward decentralized actors, but they're going to be using their own machinery and then exchanging on the blockchain, not necessarily using the blockchain for AI. So long story short, we don't know. I think there's a lot of cool explorations. It's really awesome to watch, but it really does change week to week.
Great, yeah, thank you. Yes, I think there has been a lot of excitement in this space, like you said. I think some is about putting buzzwords together, but I do hope, right, in the future, decentralization and AI, they are going to meet in some substantial ways in the future. If you think about what agents, when we really have autonomous agents, what they are going to do, how they may operate autonomously together. I think a lot of exciting things will happen then. So now, maybe let's come to the last question. What kind of final thoughts you have that you wanted to share with developers and the students for future technical developments in the space?
I heard a line the other day that I really liked when people were talking about the blockchain, and particularly the blockchain in regard to finance, is, I think it was a friend of mine said something like, Web3 companies, they're speed running every financial mistake of the last 100 years. And I thought that was such a fascinating idea because, it was like proposed cynically, but when you think about it, like what's going on with the way that it's decentralized and the way that people are learning and the transparency and the knowledge that people are accumulating, what it does mean is that the development that is happening in this space versus private markets is literally faster than anything else going on. And so for me, I think my final thoughts are like, stick with it. The speed of this space is amazing, and we are catching up to what you see is going on in a lot of the TradFi markets. But TradFi markets, just because of the history, because of the infrastructure, because of regulatory bodies, they move a lot slower. Blockchain has the ability to leap this entire space, just bring us far further ahead in much less time. But it's just going to take curiosity. It's going to take focus, and it's. I think the people in this room hopefully are the ones that have it. So I think my final thoughts is I'm looking forward to what you all figure out next.
So maybe I can go next. But since I don't have like background in the startup world, as somebody that has worked with like a company like a traditional finance company, that's something that I completely agree with. Things are going very slow, and incumbents, I think it's not just because they're not scared of what is happening. The process, the way that they can take the technology into market, is very slow. Regulations, how they want to do things very carefully. So since your question was about like the engineers, the developers, how they can do it, at least I think a message that I have for those heads of engineering teams inside these incumbent companies like Visa is to think that to move much more agile and don't necessarily go the way that your existing products have been built. This is like a groundbreaking, this is like a paradigm shift for these businesses. So it's not just a new product that you wanted to add to the portfolio of your company as much as, a lot of other products, for example, at Visa that I've seen that are getting launched. This is very different. And CEOs, execs, they need to be aware of this and try to move their, teams in a way, and a lot of lessons learned from successful startups like Aptos or Circle, how they can allocate these resources in a much more efficient way to be able to attract, first of all, I think the big talent that is already going to great startups, great people like that the other panelists that are here. These are, a lot of them have worked in big tech companies and eventually found that the fastest way to get what they want is in the startup setting. And I think this is one of the things that we need to be aware. And my message is not necessarily for just developers, but for the broader engineering and also execs in this domain that are actively trying to push this domain forward in the TradFi world.
Those are great messages. I think the only thing I want to add on here is that as students, like you guys are probably thinking a lot about your careers going forward. Do you want to do AI? Do you want to blockchain? Do you want to work at a large company? There's a lot of things you can do out there. My pitch to you for blockchain would be, it's a chance to really rethink the way the internet was designed and think about how decentralized, democratized internet ought to be. And to build the applications, like as Imani said, like these applications haven't been built yet. They haven't been designed yet. We see that as the technology is approaching the point at which a lot of the Web 2 functions can be done in Web 3. For very, very little cost and for very, very high throughput and supported at scale, to support the largest applications in the world, whether it's, the next phase of Twitter or the next phase of Facebook or other products. It is definitely a great time to go ahead and take your shot and build on Web3 and see what happens. We've seen in Aptos has been live for like a year and a half. Tens of millions of dollars have been raised for projects building on top of Aptos. There are hundreds of projects building today. And this is just one of many different L1s, L2s in the space. There's an amazing opportunity for you to forge your own future and forge the future of the internet in the blockchain space. And we would be really excited to see what you all can build.
Great. With that, let's thank our great panel. Thank you.
There has been an accident on the Bay Bridge. There have been accidents on 101. So some of our panelists are running a bit late. So we're going to change the order. And we're going to go into the TradeFi panel. So I want to invite up Catherine Gu of Visa and Christine Parler, who is our faculty co-director for Berkeley RDI, and Kevin Farley from Franklin Templeton. So please join me in welcoming them to this panel.
Oh. Hi. And hello, everyone here. So I guess we represent TradFi, traditional, but perhaps quite important area of the world. So first of all, could I ask you just to introduce yourselves? Because they might be confused by the alignment of the pictures and the people, but please, go ahead.
We look different, right?
Thank you. So I'm on that side in case, it's confusing. Anyway, I'm also from Visa, so very close colleague with Modi, who you just heard from the panel. I lead our global effort for CBDC and tokenization on the product side, so lots of exciting things that we're doing there, so yeah.
Kevin Fairley. In 2015, I built a company that mitigated default risk using various types of machine learning. That company was growing rapidly. Franklin Templeton came in and bought 100% of it. And I got to know Jenny Johnson, our CEO, quite well. And after integrating that company and that philosophy within their global complex of 1.6 trillion of AUM, I noticed the opportunity that Avery and the group before you were speaking about, and I noticed that there was sincere white space at Franklin Templeton. No one wanted to rock the boat. No one wanted to seed these founders. And so I've invested in over 50 companies on behalf of Franklin Templeton. I am the managing director in GP for Franklin Templeton Blockchain Fund 1 and Franklin Templeton Blockchain Fund 2. My lawyers picked the name of the funds. But it's fun because what we cannot build, I know I can support with dollars. And I have very strong opinions in terms of this innovation cycle. So that's why I'm here.
Great. Well, thank you. Just to clarify the sort of terms of the conversation, I guess. So we're going to be talking a lot about different decentralized finance applications or DeFi applications, and also a lot about the technology. So in terms of TradFi, what is interesting about DeFi? Is it the applications on DeFi, or is it the technology, and is that the thing that should be integrated?
I guess there's many layers to that. And I think like very unique to the Visa perspective, we think about everything coming from the payments perspective. And I know majority of you know what Visa does today. So just to summarize, we're in the midst of money flows. Anything that touches money to do with money movement, we're here to figure out how we can facilitate that movement. So as we're looking at the entire space, we actually start from the much more fundamental. What does blockchain represent? What does this piece of technology can do for a payments company like Visa? And this is where the first principle starts, where we're thinking about blockchain more as a future payment rail. And that's very important to think about it that way, right? Because blockchain can be many things. It can be a ledger recorder. It can be value exchange. But when it does come to payments, there's something unique about it. And so we start from that. And so I think there's a lot of interesting technology that we can potentially leverage from the blockchain to think about how to build future payment rails. And then to your point about the DeFi world, I do think that's a very cool innovation that sort of took people by surprise in a way, from decentralization, you're trying to re-tackle the financial problems and trying to see how that can be done. So I think right now, as we're thinking about DeFi, there is a potential interesting community for distribution purpose that, you do have it mass, like an ecosystem built out around DeFi. So how can we tap into that? Because again, everything to do with finance, there is a money flow. And that's where our focus is going to be about. How can we really provide values to different type of users, whether that's traditional type of users or new type of users who are very adept at using crypto as a type of payment. So yeah.
Sure. So at Franklin, we're building and investing in the space. So on the tech side, I think we've tokenized somewhere around $600 million, and it's a tokenized money market fund. And there's future use cases that I can't speak about due to regulation, but I think the pace of that build has been built on the premise that the technology is really important. So we turned a transfer agency into a smart contract. So when you think about the deflationary cost pressure that puts on a legacy transfer agency and legacy infrastructure, it's monumental. And so the next phase is, okay, if we can turn a transfer agency into a smart contract and we can do that in conjunction with the SEC, what else can we do? Can we make this tokenized money market fund more fungible and usable and ubiquitous across the DeFi system, right? And so that's really phase 2, is how do you work hand in hand with the regulatory bodies in different jurisdictions on a global basis, knowing that we've done the work using the base layers, tokenized the legacy product, and we have a lot of use cases on why people do use the product, aside from interest rates are at 5% right now. On the DeFi side, I like to invest in what we can't build. And what I mean by that is I invest in things that maybe there would be some commentary from regulatory bodies. I think if you are innovating alongside what regulatory bodies say, you may be seeking evolution, not revolution, and that's a problem, right? Because you're being backed by venture capitalists. And so, I like to fund things that are structured finance products that are normally sitting on legacy derivatives desks like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, and then we tokenize those strategies and then we give them to the public, right? And so that's a great example of me giving funds to the founders of that company to break down that barrier between Main Street and Wall Street, so Main Street can have access to such a superior product in DeFi land. But I'm not so sure Franklin could go out and offer that product tomorrow. But I'm happy to support it as the venture founder, or as the venture partner.
Wow, okay.
Makes sense?
I'll invest with you.
Okay, cool.
Just sort of tokenization and innovation. One of the biggest innovative tokenized products, one can argue, are stable coins. So where are they going? What's going to happen with stable coins?
I mean, that's a great question. I think, and I just, again, for pretext, right? The word tokenization, I guess, is not a new word, although maybe on the blockchain term, this is kind of like emerging more recently. So, we at Visa has been doing tokenization back starting from 2010. So it's a different type of token. It's really representing your underlying credit card information. So as you're looking at your credit card, that 16-digit PAN is really representing a lot of your personal sensitive data. And we're trying to incentivize that and trying to protect the information. So that is a tokenization already. Now, of course, as we're looking at blockchain tokenization, that has a slightly different thing. But I think this underlying technology that is similar in the sense, it is token, after all. It's a string of bits of information that represents something underlying. So on the blockchain, is representing about the assets and the ownership. And this is where stablecoin comes in, right? Because here we're really looking at the representation of money itself and associate ownership to do with it. Now, stablecoin is not the original. Original is like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and everything. Of course, that's not stable. And from that evolution, we have stablecoins. But again, in the broader context of what we call the evolution of money, and this is where you have now different forms of money emerging, right? So stablecoin is one type. You have CBDC, which is central bank digital currencies. And much more recently, if we are looking at what happens in the past 18 to 24 months, lots of banks are starting to get onto the scene, and this is what Modi referred to, of tokenizing bank liabilities, and this is what you've probably seen, tokenizing of bank deposits and such. So I think stablecoin is lying that whole kind of big spectrum of where the money is evolving. In terms of where it's going, I mean, I think previously Jeremy also referenced the fact that at the very beginning, stablecoins, majority of the use cases in trading, right? It's really the on-chain representation of dollar, where that goes. I think personally where I would find very interesting going forward is to look at much more real-world use cases, whether that's, say, on cross-border transactions or remittance flows and such, because this is where, going back to kind of thinking about the payments use cases, after all, as we're looking at blockchain and stablecoin is a way to transact, where are the pain points right now in today's world? And I do think, for example, in cross-border flows, we definitely have a lot because of the existing corresponding banking model certainly is not the most efficient. So we'll have to see. I think that's still going to take time, but that will be in line with all the other parallel development, in my opinion, with respect to how CBDC will go as well as tokenized deposits. You can't think about them in a silo, so yeah.
And just to follow up on that, do you think that stablecoins are going to be consumer-facing, so retail-facing, or is it going to be wholesale? Like a settlement coin?
Yeah, I think right now it is retail-facing, right? Because that's the majority of the use cases, and of course institutions are using that. I think to think about wholesale, I'm not the expert here, but I do think it has certain regulatory what is the regulatory status with respect to stablecoin? Because in today, for the wholesale settlement between financial institutions, they settle in central bank reserves. Now, that doesn't need to be CBDC, but they do settle, say, in the Fed facility end of the day. I don't know if stablecoin will reach that status to say in the future, the biggest world financial banks will be using stablecoin. That's a TBD question. So, yeah.
And in terms of your world, what is the value of tokenization? Why is it better than using pieces of paper, for example?
Well, I think we've seen the evolution of digitization and the efficiencies that come out of that, right? And so when you tokenize an instrument and then at the epicenter of that instrument is a smart contract, I think, at least on the money market fund side, like you have programmatically created an instrument that pays dividends automatically, right? So you take out a lot of the human intervention and human interaction. And I think that efficiency that you get from the smart contract that's embedded in the token is the number one go-to reason why I'm a fan of tokenization. I think a lot of early use cases focused on liquidity. If you tokenize something, it becomes liquid. And I think most of us know now that that is a false narrative. You need market depth, you need market makers, and you need global adoption. Crypto is truly global, but I think understanding what we can make more efficient and reduce cost by tokenizing said instrument is something that becomes paramount in the argument.
So who is a smart contract replacing? Let me put it that way.
Oh boy. Well, I don't want to create enemies, but I mean, intermediaries, right? And
Intermediaries.
so I think like there are near-term replacements that we could say bye to tomorrow, and there are long-term replacements that I think are being augmented, and their roles are being slowly revoked or slowly pushed back. I think anyone who is seeking rent, right, in between you and the end customer, and taking a part of that your supply chain and charging you for that. I mean, transfer agencies, if you look at the enterprise value of them, they're massive, right? And I think if you begin to automate a majority of their process and flow, and we know that blockchain is deterministic and AI is probabilistic, and to remove all the manual processes and take something as simple as a tokenized treasury fund and automate the entire thing. Daily NAV, dividends, accounting. And so the conversation can get very contentious very quickly, but when the data is as deterministic as blockchain is, I'm willing to take the more aggressive side of that argument.
Automation has come to many different industries, so perhaps this is automation coming to finance or TradFi.
There's a lot of automation coming to TradFi, and to pick up on your, cross-border payments comments and remittances, I would say on the venture side, a lot of my growth, like real revenue growth for young companies that don't have tokens per se, they're just young companies and they're building and they raised a seed round, the revenue growth per employee is phenomenal throughout Latin America, using dollar-backed stables, executing cross-border payments, on-off ramps, B2B2C. And it's quite interesting. There's a lot of rhetoric going on from leaders in traditional financial circles that think the States loves the dollar-backed stables because it's a sneaky way to leak the dollar right into the world, right? And so in a time period when we're fearful of that trade unwinding due to fear of the US dollar, we're also seeing a movement of stables permeating through societies in ways that we previously have not.
So you talked a little bit about liquidity, and obviously you're very interested in issues around money. So let me ask you a very speculative question. If you have a technology that allows safe collateral swaps, why do we need a payment rail at all?
What do you mean by payment?
So just, usually when we think about any kind of asset, we swap it into dollars and then we buy the next asset. why can't we just do asset to asset without actually worrying about the payment rail?
That's an interesting question. I think even if it's, and by the way, I've not thought about this, so I'm really thinking on the spot, because what you're describing is a swap trade as opposed to a payment flow from A to B. You still need a rail, because even that, if you're looking at a delivery versus payment or payment versus payment, there still need to be something underlying to facilitate that, right? So as we're looking at how the future type of quote unquote payments can evolve, that might expand the space. Because right now, as we're looking at payment flows, it's very simple, right? Like you as a buyer, you pay the merchant. That's a one-way flow. What you're describing is a two-way flow. So I don't think that means you don't need payments. It's just different new forms of payment emerging, but underlying you still need the rails. And hence, in the future, as we're thinking about these rails, could that all be coming onto the blockchain? The answer is probably yes, because we're already seeing the experimentation. And again, as I've emphasized that, where does Visa come in? Visa comes in when it comes to the cash leg, because you always will need a cash leg. And this is where potentially we are trying to facilitate that thing to be faster, more available, 24/7, programmable and such.
I would just add that peer-to-peer is a right? So we have the ability to do anything we want peer-to-peer. I think when the IRS comes a knocking and they want to verify, how much money we made or transactions we paid, were these payments for services rendered, I think you have to answer those questions ethically at the end of the year and make your payment on April 15th in the United States. But, the use cases that are arising between this is truly global, right? So 2 weeks ago, I wrote a children's book using AI, and I put it out on the internet, and it was about a 13-year-old pug, and I wrote it for my children, and I raised money globally in a native cryptocurrency that I will not name because I'm an investor, so I don't want to pump it, but people all over the world funded, and I converted it to USDC, and then I sent thousands of dollars to the pug rescue of Northern California, and it was all peer-to-peer. It was one wallet to my wallet, and then I offered to use a third party called Breadcrumbs to audit, the money flows to make sure that I wasn't hiding anything. And so the technology is there to do peer-to-peer in anything you want. And I think the only time you get in trouble is when you don't disclose it. I didn't make any money, and I don't have a charitable foundation. But money did flow, and so I'm sure I'll get questions at the end of the year because it was above a certain amount. And so when you think about the ability to set up that wallet, collect money from people all over the world, and send it instantaneously for nothing using a very high throughput chain, I don't know what you need in the middle anymore.
If I can just opine on that, I think there is a very particular point about disintermediation peer-to-peer, which makes sense. But I think there's also other type of payment flows, because the ones that we deal with specifically, Visa is a B2B company, right? Where even though Visa's name is everywhere, it's on your credit card, we're not actually directly dealing with consumers. So it comes back to, as our clients are the global banks around the world, why do they need intermediaries in the first place? There's a lot of coordination games in between. If you're thinking about your JP Morgan and trying to coordinate with the rest of the biggest world banks trying to facilitate whether it's payments or transactions, is not easy. Again, you're the world's biggest bank. There's lots of overhead around that. Yes, blockchain can save part of it, but it's not going to solve for all the things. So, and this is because we're trying to challenge ourselves, like what's our new role in the future? I do agree to a large extent that blockchain will make a lot of the things much more efficient, and especially when it comes to the human element, I think it will make it much more succinct, so to speak. But that does not mean you will not need an intermediary, because intermediary is there to act as a coordinator in between many of the different. So as we're thinking about a lot of the role that Visa can play, is like a hub and spoke, because we make a lot of the things easier for any single entity who can interact with the rest of the world through our network, our network of networks. And that is not a technology thing. It's much more about certain roles that different ecosystem player can add to this,
Multi-sided markets.
Exactly.
It's very, very powerful.
Yeah.
So I guess we talked about big issues. Let's go. Oh, I guess we talked about pugs as well. So, but let's go to a really specific one. So, how is Franklin Templeton focusing its or how does it see its digital asset future? Let's put it that way.
So it's broken down into, I'd say, 3 pillars, right? So I run the venture pillar, I run 2 funds, seed stage. The second pillar is the tokenization unit. So they've tokenized the money market fund. They've begun to deploy it across various chains. I can't announce which ones yet. And then the third group is Node Ops. I think money market fund business in 2018. And the one thing I'll say about if you're building in the space, I think you should be investing in the space. And if you're investing in the space, I think you should be building in the space. And so one of my very first investments was a company called Curve, which was later bought by PayPal. It's a unit, which is a separate unit. I don't know how many employees we have now. We once had 2, and now we have a lot, right? But where there's this constant feedback loop between those developers that build, those developers that integrate with really high-profile projects, whether it's Avery at Aptos, whether it's USDC, shows treasuries because it was the lowest hanging fruit to tokenize, right? And now that we've seen roughly $600 million come into that product, the question is, well, what's next? Like, what can you auto-rebalance, like an ETF, right? What can you streamline? And how much can, I don't want to speak for her, but if I was Jenny Johnson, I'd say, okay, if tech is deflationary, how much cost can I reduce out of this place? And how many humans do I have doing jobs that could be replaced by a lot of what we're talking about today? And so we are a very small subset of the $1.6 trillion. Like, that is a fact, but we are slowly creeping up the stack in various forms, looking to tokenize our next asset, right? Fixed income for me it hits very close to home. And so in terms of DeFi and bringing us back to the topic of this panel and traditional finance, I'm a huge advocate of being a liquidity provider, right? We have a lot of money laying around, and I think anywhere from an 8 to 10% unlevered yield for someone like Franklin Templeton is really, really good. It's a mutual fund company. And so why aren't we a massive liquidity provider? Well, some of the reasons are regulatory. We have to make sure that we have a heat map from chain analysis on every liquidity pool that we participate in, because if our dollars are commingled with bad dollars, our trust and reputation's done, right? And so we're working through right now a lot of those, what if this happens, what if this happens, and what if this happens, things that I would probably do if I was running my own company that you necessarily can't do because reputation and trust is paramount, at a larger business. Mm-hmm. But we're working through, I think, becoming a bigger liquidity provider for a lot of these DeFi pools, tokenizing more assets, and continuing to invest. Like I said, to quantify, I've only made 50 investments since 2021, but my team has multiplied exponentially, and I'm looking to bring that number way up. Mm-hmm. And so,
blue skies.
Very blue. I'm an optimist. Yeah. So yeah.
And what about Visa? How does Visa view itself, I guess, in this evolving ecosystem? How should we think about it?
I mean, very much echoing your optimism. Where, I think the industry is really at a tipping point. It really represents something, I think, that we haven't seen previously, because, and we call this entire movement the tokenization of things, right? Like, to your point, I believe you can tokenize everything. Essentially, it's just bringing all type of different asset classes onto the blockchain. And taking a step back, is really this evolution of the new financial market infrastructure, right? Because it requires a whole ecosystem to change in order to fully benefit from what blockchain can deliver from these atomicity, 24/7, blah, blah, blah. So in order to do that, I think different parts of this ecosystem has to, quote unquote, upgrade themselves. And we're seeing that happening right now in real time. And that's really exciting because, when we're tracking exactly when the banks have started to become a lot more active in tokenization, including on asset management side, is actually during this crypto winter, right? When things are not doing so active, but instead the institutions are still taking a great interest on blockchain, and there's something real around it. And hence, from the Visa perspective, again, our clients are the banks, are the financial institutions. We're thinking about the roles that we can play. So going back to, the role that Visa can bring as we're thinking about it, as I said, the role of intermediary, what value can we add to this chain of things? I think there's a lot of things around rules and standards we can play, because again, I think the best rules you have right now out there is something like ERC 20. But again, as you're applying that to the regulated world, do we need something more? Do we need some extra features like other panelists have mentioned, things like privacy? Who is going to be providing the interoperability in between these different chains because we have fragmentation in the world? I think all these different problems start to kind of become interesting opportunities for intermediaries like us to hopefully add value to this ecosystem, and hence we're very bullish thanks to the fact that tokenization of things is definitely happening, so yeah.
Layer 0 could be a great interoperability play.
Sure.
I'm also an investor, so
Okay,
self-serving, yeah.
there you go. And so can we.
And so just to sort of, as we glide towards the end, tell me something that I should be looking for in 5 or 10 years' time.
Would you like to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I'll have some time to think.
Okay, so one thing I really don't like about DEXs and AMM is the fact that I think we're recreating some of the older problems that already existed, where market makers were really taking advantage of retail investors. And so in 5 to 10 years, I would like to see, and I am speaking to some very bright people around the world, the creation of decentralized exchanges and AMMs that are not out to arb retail, but that are actually out to help retail get better pricing in a very transparent market. And I think that's something that will take five years out. But I don't want to pick on publicly traded companies that rip off retail investors today, but there are a lot of them. And it's because there's too much infrastructure in between the actual investor, you and me, and then what happens in between our decision to buy a share of stock and when it actually settles. We're paying for everything, for the order flow. It's all getting passed to us. And I think that entire market changes for the retail investor in 5 to 10 years. I like what Uniswap did, and I like what some of these other decentralized exchanges did, but I still think there's an immense amount of arb on the retail investor by traditional market makers that are in that picture, and I don't like it. So I would look for a more streamlined, cost-effective investment experience for the retail user, the retail investor.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about it as you're saying, because I do think the first wave of adoptions are going to start with the institutional, the ones who have the money, who can try out these things. We're not really there yet in terms of mass adoption and retail. I know that's the goal, the common goal across many people in this field, but I think that's where, what does it take us from now? I want to buy my Starbucks using like USDC. I mean, my genuine answer is no, because I don't need that, because today's the payments ecosystem is pretty efficient. So what does it take in the future? Well, there might be other things that I can't think of right now that maybe I just haven't looked enough, but like a good product that's really tying the digital identity with payments, because that's absolutely going to be needed. And to a large extent, maybe, to me, I feel like that's underinvested, just because a great identity product is almost like a utility, because it's not only just the person providing, it's like it can be used by others who can then leverage the identity that you've done it once, and then you can, and it would be great to see how that can evolve together with the tokenization, as we've said. And just by the way, tokenization in itself is very new, right? We are at so much to it. Again, it's not a technology challenge. It's more about all your existing business logics, things to do with compliance, things to do with KYC. How do you make that entirely on-chain? And that's not an easy question to answer. So there's a lot of work that we need to do. So yeah.
New world. So thank you very much to both of you.
Thank you.
Issues in the Bay Area. We are going to take a 10-minute break, and we'll start at 3:10 with our Lens to the Future VC panel. And we'll be joined by Abakal from Electric Capital and Dan Robinson from Paradigm. And then we will follow that with our final panel. All right, see you all at 3:10. Hello. We're going to get started again now. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming back after the break. So now we're really pleased to share with you a lens to the future of blockchains with our VC guest, moderated by Professor John Song. She's joined by Dan Robinson, who's head of research and a general partner at Paradigm, and Abakal Gar of Electric Capital, where he is the managing.
For Dan that he gets lumped in with the VCs.
Great, thanks a lot, Abasho, and then for joining us. Really great to see you here again. Thank you so much. So let's get started. So first, maybe just briefly, you can. I mean, you guys both have been really veterans in the space. So maybe you can just briefly introduce yourself, share with the audience here, right? Just briefly about your experience here.
So I actually started my career as a lawyer before quitting to become an engineer at a crypto startup. And while working there, got involved in the open source protocol research community and on ETH research and with people working on Plasma and early stages of DeFi. And through that, ended up joining Paradigm as the first research partner, and have been there for 5 years. Worked closely with the rest of the investment team on the portfolio, including companies like Uniswap and Optimism.
My background's mostly as an entrepreneur, and so started and sold 2 companies. And when we were doing our second company, it was basically a way to orchestrate a lot of GPUs across a lot of different data centers, which turns out is useful again 10 years later. And while we were doing that, we came across a bunch of Bitcoin miners, and so we started doing some Bitcoin mining. Totally misunderstood it. We thought it was initially a computational platform, like interested about the ability to like write code and ship it. Did not understand it as a potential store of value at all. Decided that sucked and nobody would ever use it for that, and so we sold all our Bitcoin. And then a couple of years later, we saw Ethereum, and we said, oh, this is actually what we thought Bitcoin was 5 years ago. This is super cool. And so we sort of became enamored with that and started dabbling with that. And then just about 5.5 years ago, about the same time as Paradigm, we started up and mostly do seed and Series A investing, tokens, kind of across all sectors. So.
Great, thank you. So yeah, let's get started. So the blockchain space really changes really fast. One never gets bored in the blockchain space. It felt like the Luna collapse, the FTX collapse was just yesterday. But already there's so much new excitement in the blockchain space. So first, could you share a little bit, given the many years of experience you have in the space, what excites you now and what excites you about the future in the space?
So I can get excited about a lot of things. I think the lens through which I view a lot of stuff has been fairly constant for the past since I joined the space. In that I think there's 2 trends that are really that are just going to keep improving and that enable everything else. And one is I think that the scaling of the technology, and it just has been action cost with latency with the throughput that's currently supported. And so increasing that and decreasing fees is probably the most important enabling technology for everything. And then I think in decentralized finance, where I've spent a lot of my time, I tend to think that there's just maybe thousands of incremental improvements at every single step in order to just make so I think just the long sort of path to basically make order execution, for example, or make efficiency of lending protocols better, I think is still really fascinating. And so like these things, the things that you could just chart them, it takes a very long time. It's when you zoom in, it's not going to look like an asymptote or like a new unlock, but over time is going to be increasingly getting better. I think that to me is what excites me most. It's just being on this curve that's constantly going up.
Not that dissimilar. I kind of have 2 thoughts. So one, there's a technical part to this, and then I think there's a social part to this. The technical part that sort of captured our attention is, these systems make a fundamentally different set of trade-offs than the internet. These systems essentially say, well, what if I'm willing to give up some speed and scalability and throughput, but what I want is ownership of my data or censorship resistance or seizure resistance? What then? And our belief was that even though these systems were not that high throughput or that robust yet, that over time they would get better, and specifically that set of trade-offs where you really care about ownership of your data, or immutability of data, or censorship resistance, seizure resistance, but you're willing to give up some speed and scalability and throughput, really matters when you're talking about money. So sort of our core area of focus for many years now has been what we call programmable money. We didn't coin that term, but I think people kind of know what that means, is once you have digital stores of value and you can write code around them, you can recreate the entire financial system, because most of the financial system is, here's a pile of money, here's who has access to it, let me tell you what needs to happen with the cash flow in these assets over the next 5, 10, 20 years, right? That's REITs and HELOCs and mortgages and securities and derivatives and so on. So this is just a better technical infrastructure to recreate all of that rather than writing a bunch of legal code. You can write computer code, and you can do that in a 24/7 global permissionless market, which if you look at the internet, the internet created that for information, and I think that this technology creates it for money. So that's the technical side. I think the social side is just as interesting, which is there are a lot of people, I think, coming at this from different perspectives, but it's sort of, blind person and the elephant kind of situation. I think we're all sort of feeling around the same concept here, and it just happens to be that a lot of technologists have converged on this view as well. But I think society is broken in a lot of ways, and a lot of people see that. And whether that is the hollowing out of the middle class, or wealth inequality, or you look at trust in public schools, or trust in the press and the media, or trust in the banks, like there's a lot of data you can look at now, and so a lot of people are sort of poking around and being like, wait, something broke. And if anybody knows like the infamous what happened in 1971 sort of like meme, like something broke. It's unclear when it broke exactly, but something broke. And I think what these technologies really offer is an opportunity to reimagine a lot of the social infrastructure of society in a way that doesn't necessarily require the same trust assumptions that we've had that have been baked into those institutions since World War II. And so as much as this is a technical movement, I think it's a social movement where a lot of people are saying, actually, we need to reimagine some of these fundamental institutions in society, and we need to design them in such a way that we avoid the concentration of power and the consequences that come from that in the legacy systems, which worked really well from like post-World War II to, like 1980 or something, 1985. These systems worked really well, but then they kind of broke, and we need to reimagine them. And so policymakers are seeing that in various ways and trying to fix it, and writers are seeing that, and economists are seeing that, and technologists are seeing that. And I think this is the technologist approach to, well, what if we could reimagine these systems in a way that removed those power centers and got rid of that concentration of power and structurally made it so that you couldn't. And that's a really interesting thought exercise, I think, is the technology allowing you to express this sort of like social belief system.
Great, thank you. Yes, so these ideas all really make the blockchain technology really exciting, and the space, we all believe that, we hope that the future will be built on this decentralized trust and so on. And also even including in our own DeFi MOOC, like the first lecture, I talk about why decentralized finance infrastructure actually makes sense, can significantly simplify the entire finance infrastructure stack. But however, if we look at the adoption, again, so in the earlier panel we talked about, briefly talked about like blockchain versus AI, how things, they are both really fast evolving space, but also very different. So if we look at, for example, the adoption in AI, the kind of numbers that we are talking about, so for example, Midjourney is the largest, has the largest Discord server, and the OpenAI, ChatGPT is the fastest growth app, which grew to 100 million users in 2 months. So this is the kind of numbers we are talking about in the AI space. And we can look at numbers in the blockchain space as well. So the question is, what do you think, how will adoption in the blockchain space move forward? What will really drive, the kind of adoption that we see in the AI space, in the blockchain space? Which areas will be adopted first, second, and what makes a difference between adoption speed and the breadth in the blockchain space versus the AI space, for example?
I have sort of a lame answer or an excuse for our space, in that I don't think it is likely at any point to be sort of a story like the adoption of mobile, which was incredibly fast, or the adoption of something like ChatGPT. I think it's more, as inherently a multiplayer technology, where you really do need other people to be on the same one in order to use it, and we're adopting that. There's like some significant cost to switching over the system. I think it's more similar to something like the early days of email or the internet, where you just have this like very slow but constantly rising tide. And I think that's that's something where you have to be fairly patient for it. That said, I do think we're starting to see we're starting to get to reach a point where like actually you can see faster growth of the technology and in some applications because of more cheaper stablecoin transfers on layer 2, things like that. But I'd also say it's not inherently, the number of users may not be the right metric. And I think for crypto, I would rather be looking at dollars in the system or dollar transfer potentially, which again I think has been a more impressive story if you look at it that way.
Yeah, plus one to that last comment. So two or three thoughts maybe really quickly. So one, I think there's this adage, which startup people know, but bears repeating, which is people tend to dramatically overestimate what's possible in 2 years and dramatically underestimate what's possible in 10 years. And there's just some human cognitive biases that produce that sort of intuition. So, like the world was pretty different in AI in 2014, right, 10 years ago. When was ImageNet, like 12, 13? OpenAI, I think it started in 15. And so like, it takes a while. And so I think a lot of the like basics of this technology are kind of like 2017-ish, like 2016, 2017-ish is kind of, I think you could start saying, okay, what happens in 10 years? And I think most people just are too optimistic about how quickly these things will happen. But when they tip, they really tip really, really, really quickly. And I think we're starting to get to that point. And so I think it's, it's an easy out in some sense, and so ask me again in 5 years, but I would not be surprised if in the next couple of years you sort of start to see some of those tipping points. One data point of evidence here might just be like if you look at the number of registered users on Coinbase, or you look at the number of users who hold some sort of US dollar stablecoin, and how quickly those things can grow, especially in an up market. Okay, so that's one set of observations. Timing is always tricky, but generally people underestimate what's possible in 10 years and are sort of too short-term optimistic. And these things really require patience. Another good example is like self-driving. Like I was a seed investor in a company called Cruise. You actually have self-driving cars now, but that was 2014, right? It was about 10 years. And people got way over their skis, and even by like 2017, people were like, this is never gonna happen. And here we are 10 years later, and it's actually happening. You can actually take a self-driving car. So something like that I think it bears repeating. Okay, second thought is there's an interesting question here of what does it mean to be a user? And I think this is partly what Dan is getting at is like, I actually think the US dollar is a consumer use case. And there are many, many millions of users in the world that want dollars, that can't get dollars today, and this is the easiest way to get dollars. There's a great irony, I think, if anybody knows, Elon has this sort of saying that's like the funniest outcome is the most likely, or the most ironic outcome is the most likely. And I think it's just kind of ironic that maybe the killer use case for this stuff is the US dollar, given what Satoshi's intentions were when he started this. It's kind of funny that might be the killer use case. But yeah, I think like 1 to 3 billion people want dollars. You can now text somebody some dollars, and it's just a cryptographic hash, and there's nothing any government can do to stop it, and that's pretty powerful, actually, without shutting off the internet. And so there's this question of like, how do you define a user here? And I think you can make an argument that actually you might already be at something like 50 million users, because all these people using Tether. Like if you look at the data, people may not realize this, but if you look at USDT plus USDC, I think it's at an all-time high right now. Like it's actually bounced back from 21, 22. And I would not be surprised if over the next year to 2 years you get to something like a couple 100 million users of US dollar stablecoins, because so much of the world wants dollar stablecoins. Like if you look at, take something like Nigeria, the Naira was pegged to the dollar, they sort of broke the peg officially, you got like 40% inflation in a couple of months, and all these people are hosed. All of those people would much rather have dollars, and now they can get them. So that's kind of the second observation is I think the way we as Americans often think about users is sort of from our lens, and we don't really, most people who are Americans don't actually understand the dollar. And I think that's actually a killer consumer use case. The third thing I'll note is it's possible that it's not through DeFi that you get consumer adoption, but it's through NFT. We launched a small data site called nftpulse.org, and you could just go look at the numbers. But we're not back at transaction volume numbers that we were in 21, like billions of dollars a week in transaction volume. But if you look at revenue numbers, we're actually doing really well. And it's because the Bitcoin NFT ecosystem really took off with ordinals. And those have fees. And so if you look at marketplaces like Magic Eden, where Paradigm and Electric are both investors, just disclosure, they're doing record numbers. And if you look at those numbers in terms of like revenue numbers, they're bigger than eBay was at IPO. It's just like, I think we've forgotten what an early market looks like. So you can go back and read like the S1 prospectus from eBay in like 1996. And these NFT marketplaces are doing way more GMV, gross merchandise volume, and revenue than some of these marketplaces were in '96. But nobody in like '96, '97 that looked at those numbers thought that those things weren't real. It really is a question of like, what is the forward-looking compound growth rate? Like, can you sustain forward-looking growth? So I would argue actually we probably have something like a GPT-2. If you look at like the NFT market right now, there's like a decent number of people that are like, hey, this is real. And now it's really a question of what does that growth rate look like going forward for the next 3 years?
One issue is arguably I think crypto has grown too fast at several points in its history, and that NFTs sort of had a going mainstream moment in 2021.
Yeah.
And when it was probably before they were ready for it.
Yeah.
And like a lot of the time, a lot more money has ended up flowing into crypto faster than.
So much of the use case does involve moving money around. I think so much money flows into this space before the tech is ready, or before the infrastructure is ready, or before the user experience is ready, or before the companies are ready. And so the degree of difficulty I think that founders have to deal with in this space is just, it's next level. Like operationally, how you have to deal with running $1 million run rate in 3 months, and then 18 months later, you're back at like 8 million run rate. It's just like the volatility in the business is so crazy because the internet's wired up now, right? So it's just like the money can flow so quickly. But actually, often I think works to the detriment. Yeah, it's to how many people are here, the expectations would be way, way lower. It's just like everybody can now see that this is happening, and then billions of dollars can flow in really quickly. So the expectations get totally out of whack with what's possible with the tech. And so it's a little bit sort of unfair to the technology and the technologists who are building, because that has its own pace. You can't like do 10 years of research in a year. It just takes 10.
I think Dan also briefly touched on the DeFi space. I think DeFi space is one of the first, and definitely it's a key area in blockchain. And so can you talk a little bit in terms of what you see as next steps, and also in the future? Are we seeing, most of the the big innovations have already been done? It's mainly just incremental improvements, like you said, innovation missing. And what do you see in 5 years, like where the DeFi space is going to be like?
In the interest of like allowing myself to be proven horribly wrong, I will say I think for the most part, I think we know what people will be doing and what the core functions of DeFi will be. And this is in some permutations, trading assets, borrowing against assets, and using synthetic realm of use cases are, those are likely to be, this is the subject of decentralized finance going forward, and that's partly because I think it matches roughly the substance of centralized finance, but with its own quirks. So I'm when people say like, oh, like brand new like DeFi primitive or something, like very often they're just remixing the same ingredients. But then I think that's okay. And B, I think there's a ton of revolution to be had in how those things are done. I think we're nowhere close to the final form for how decentralized exchanges work, for how decentralized lending works. And so I think the space is wide open for huge improvements in it. And hopefully some of that will, I think, still come from people who have already been active in the space. But I think a lot of it will come from new players of the space. And I think, so I would just say, like, if you're interested in like going into DeFi, you shouldn't be saying like, oh, like it's all already picked over and like I need to find something completely new and different. It's like there's just 1,000x improvement in how things are done to be had.
One way to think about this, and generally speaking in markets, is kind of like we were talking about, people underestimate what's possible in 10 years. The reason for that is that these markets tend to grow exponentially, and humans have really bad intuitions for exponential growth, as evidenced by COVID. And it's partly because, just as like there yesterday, that's not how biology works. It obviously at a microbiology scale does work that way with bacteria, but that's not our intuition. So like our primate brains don't know how to handle exponential growth. But these markets are exponential. And it often feels absurd to stand at a moment in time and then look forward. It would have stood in like 1998 and extrapolated exponentially, and you would have gotten to like Amazon is going to be $1 trillion company, but you would have sounded like a raging crazy person. Like you might as well be standing on the street corner like yelling, right? It's just like you'd sound like a total crazy person saying that. Calls are like 1/1000th as big as they'll be, just given exponential growth and how many people will come in and how many dollars will come and so on, right? And there's, you look at Facebook, look at YouTube, look at NVIDIA, like just these markets often are much, much, much bigger than people anticipate. So that's kind of, I think, part of the reason why is our intuitions around exponential growth are not very good. The other thing I'll note is I think that as you can tell, I spent a lot of time thinking about I spent a lot of time thinking about the processation of, I think, humans, which is we're really bad at these sort of combinatorial problems where you have these like sort of chaotic systems and trying to figure out how a bunch of things intersect with each other and the consequences of that. We're just not good at that. I can like sort of in VR. I like have no idea. And we're opening this like surface, especially with AI agents, that I think is really unprecedented and interesting. The last time I think we did something like this was roughly the invention of the corporation in the mid-1800s. Actually, the corporation was invented like 1640, but like joint stock corporation. And that like really upended society in a lot of ways because it forces a lot of questions, which we're I think now going to grapple with, which is like, well, what is the jurisdiction of a corporation? Like, does it live in a state? Like, how does identity work for a corporation versus a human? Like, I know you, I know John, you live down the street from me. I know you, but what does it mean to like have identity for a corporation? How does like liability work for a corporation? Like, does that flow through the person? Like, how does risk work? How there's like how does using your money for political purposes work as a corporation? There's like a bunch of consequences downstream, and now we're like 200 years later, kind of faced with the same problems, but for AIs, with the added complexity that the jurisdiction is now the internet, which means they don't really live in a place. So as far as like any single government is concerned, there's that much more complexity. And so I think like we're opening up a surface area here that's going to intersect with crypto, probably not in the next 2 to 4 years, but maybe like 7 to 10 years. That I worked because I think humans are not good at micropayments. It's like it feels weird for me to pay like 0.006 cents for some article on the internet to some blog. For some API, it may not be so crazy. And so I think there's actually going to be some surface area that opens up over the next 5 to 10 years, which is because like the customers may not be humans anymore. That actually like DeFi that's like a big unlock for like 1000x because there's just a bunch of new financial stuff that needs to happen where at least one of the two counterparties and maybe two out of the two counterparties or multiple counterparties are no longer humans.
Great, thank you. So we talked about DeFi as an application area. So now let's also briefly touch on the space. Also, there has been a lot of innovation. There's a lot of L1s that was built, and then there's L2s, and then people now talk about L3s. And then also, right, on Bitcoin, also there has been a lot of recent exciting development as well. So what do you think about the infrastructure space in blockchain? Do you think similarly, like most of the pieces are there, it's just incremental improvements? Are there still significant pieces missing? What do you think how the space is going to be like in 5 years?
Dan, I like it when you go first because it gives me a minute to think.
Okay.
I'll go first. Here, I'll go first. I'll give you a minute. So there's this feedback loop that happens, right? Which is people create applications and then they stress the infrastructure, and all of a sudden people say, "Oh, the infrastructure is broken," and so then we got to go build better infrastructure, and then bandwidth and capacity and computational power, whatever it is. And this is part of the reason why. There's other reasons too, but this is part of the reason why my computer today is slow to use. I think we're right now just about to hit a big unlock with a bunch of new infrastructure hitting. Like the L2s are hitting, there's like decentralized sequencers are gonna hit, EigenLayer is just about to go live, like DA is just gone live. It's like a bunch of components that just went live literally over the last 3 to 6 months, and some that are gonna launch over the next 3 to 6 months. So I think we probably unleash a lot of really interesting new innovation that soaks up a lot of that. And then we'll be back on this part of the cycle where people will say, "Oh, everything is broken. Like it's just too slow and clunky and it's congested and yada yada. Now we got to go fix it." And so then some really good smart people will identify where the bottlenecks are and try to fix it. Some of those will be incremental. Some of those will be user experience wins. Some of those will be like material major breakthroughs. But to me, this is just computation. This is just like a never-ending thing. It's like every 3 years we need new infrastructure. You throw out the old code base and build a new code base.
Yeah. I'm not sure I have much to add. I think the very rickety and limited state of crypto infrastructure right now is probably the most incredibly bullish thesis for the industry.
Yeah, 1000%.
Because the fact that everything that has happened in it is possible on these very rickety rails is impressive and shows how much demand there is to crawl over glass in order to use this kind of technology. And then I think it's also one of the biggest opportunities. As I talked about before, I think just if you see a way to increase the scale, or again, like we had actually a lot of scale increase in the last, in 2020, 21, 21, the last time you saw an increase in usage. But a lot of it is on, it's on like independent L1s that launched, right? Or it's in ways on things that are really difficult to use. So advances in interoperability, advances in UX are, I think, also part of that the advancing and ultimately scaling. So yeah, I think it's really I think it's probably the biggest opportunity. Just trying to figure out how to make blockchain scale, and I think there's still just a lot of room in it.
Great, thank you. So now let's move to the last question. We talked about decentralization and AI, the two different spaces. And of course, there's a lot of excitement at the intersection. At least people try to make excitement at the intersection between the two as well. Yeah, could you share your thoughts about at the intersection of the two, or you think it's mostly just hype, this decentralization and AI space?
Also in the interest of, again, showing myself, making a concrete prediction that would prove me to be wrong, I think the like very unique intersection of crypto and AI is going to take a while to play out, in part because I think both technologies are really early. People have been experimenting with AI agents for crypto, but that's like by far the easiest way to lose all your money immediately is to give access to a wallet to an LLM and tell it to try to do something. I think neither area of tech is really ready for the intersection of it to be even like stable or able to do something. I think there's a lot of ways in which AI is an enabling technology for crypto, and like the most prosaic is as a horizontal technology just for building. And so like I write a lot more code much faster because you can use Copilot now. I think there's ways maybe AI can be used to help find bugs in smart contracts, and I think there's interesting possible sort of specific technologies there. But that's something that AI is really doing for the entire tech industry. And then I think crypto as an enabling technology for AI, with having being able to like make payments to someone in order to use an AI model, right? Like the same things that crypto does for everything, doing for AI. So both of these, as I think there'll be customers in one industry for products of the other. But in terms of decentralized AI, my view is I think technology is inherently decentralized. For the most part, by default, it's pretty hard to keep technology in a box. And two people can use the same technology independently. It's non-rivalrous. And so for the most part, with some exceptions, like that's been the historical state of technology. I think the novelty of crypto wasn't that it was like, oh, this is the first time we have decentralized technology. It was decentralizing something consensus that had previously been thought to be basically impossible to decentralize. It's like this is the one thing you need centralization for. But in fact, like Bitcoin and Ethereum as technologies are kind of centralized. They're saying like we all have to be using the same way, or you can use it sort of independently. And so like I think there's an awkward fit in trying to like say decentralize AI, where often people trying to do it are ending up making it, basically having to fit it into this model. We make it more centralized in order to like fit it on a blockchain. And I think you should avoid trying to do that.
Yeah, a couple things I generally agree with that. I think, Don, your specific question, I think like 90% hype, 95% hype. It's mostly hype right now. Very reminiscent of the ICO bubble, very reminiscent of the AI bubble. Most of the stuff is not going to work, but it's a good way to raise money from people who don't think that deeply about these things. So you get sort of opportunists that come out and take advantage of that. Now that being said, I do think plus one to everything that is sort of like these two ecosystems are customers of each other's technologies. So like cryptography, it's like, okay, well, if you're gonna have deep fakes, you kind of want to have like a cryptographic signature for every video that the White House produces, so that you can't have some like here, it's not gonna be like President Biden says we're dropping a nuke, somewhere. It's gonna be more like, oh, it looks like he's kind of having a stroke. Something you're like, maybe, and then that's gonna get leaked, and then you had to like debunk that somehow. And so then you say, oh, well, you need like some sort of cryptographic signature, and then you're like, well, you want the social networks to be able to read that thing, so you probably want to publish it to some like open database that anybody can read from, not just to whitehouse.gov, and then you're like, you really want that thing to be like immutable with like a really high cost, and you're like, oh, you're like kind of inventing a blockchain type of a system, right? So like as a customer of these technologies, it makes sense that like AI systems will need these things. And then kind of back to this idea of AI agents as entities, like a non-human, non-business entity that we have not yet sort of gotten our heads around. It opens up a lot of interesting questions, like probably KYC for an AI is going to be some sort of cryptographic based system. It's not going to be a social security number or a TIN that like, the state of Delaware issues you. It's probably the case that you have to think about how like payments work to these things in a non-jurisdictional way. They need command line wallets because they can't walk into a bank and get a bank account, right? So like a lot of the sort of like AI agents kind of stuff, I think 10 years from now, super interesting. The other thing I'll note is I think that one sort of conceptual model for this stuff too is that I think Dan's right that a lot of this AI stuff is decentralized by its very nature. And there's a really interesting like game theoretic thing happening here, which is people around the world have realized that some of these kinds of technologies are actually national security assets. So like a GPU is a munition, right? In the internet. And you gotta be really careful about who has GPUs, and you gotta be really careful about who has data centers, and you have to be careful about who has foundational models. And there's these sort of like really interesting geopolitical questions that come out of this. So for example, let's say you're a country in the Gulf, and maybe you're not a Sharia law country, but you have like deep roots in Sharia law. Do you really want a foundational model that's been trained by a bunch of tech bros in SF on a bunch of American propaganda? Probably not, right? So there's actually a very natural decentralizing force here, which is like these things are being thought of in the modern post-internet era as munitions and tools for national security, which creates a massive decentralizing force. But then that does open up a bunch of surface area because it's not likely going to be just 3 companies that win, right? Like every Gulf state needs its own models. The Nordics will have their own thing. Like Singapore will need to do its own thing. India is going to do its own thing. And so you end up with like actually a very fragmented market. And one of the things that these technologies are good at is this sort of interop. And so a lot of the tooling that we've created here in terms of like moving money around or assets or in this sort of global context is actually a very good fit if you assume that the AI landscape is going to be very, very fragmented because of the geopolitics of it all. It's like a very natural fit to slot in as an adjacency as well. Yeah, so there's some thoughts.
Great, thank you. I think, I mean, it's such a stimulating conversation. I'd love to have it continue, but I know we are running out of time. So with that, let's thank our esteemed panelists. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, thank you. Please join me in welcoming Juan Benet, CEO and founder of Protocol Labs. Thank you, Juan, for joining us.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with, first of all, thank you for being here, or thank you for having me here as well. Great that we can get together in person. For the pandemic duration, it was kind of really bad to have to be giving a lot of talks remotely and so on. Excited to be here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk for 15 minutes, and then I want to do the last 15 minutes highly interactive. So kind of really get a bunch of questions out to talk through whatever is most relevant to you, just to kind of like wake you up a little bit and get like the memes well diffused. I'm going to start with a video. Cool. So this is not going to be, I think, like a lot of the other talks that you hear in crypto. I'm going to jump around a lot of things because I'm kind of especially when coming to a university, it's really useful to try and give you the lessons that I wish I had. And so in a sense, I'm kind of trying to giving you the talks that I would have wanted me to get. And so I'm going to jump around, and we're going to cover kind of science, technology, R&D, capital, corporations, and so on. I think that crypto has an enormous, enormous role to play in the world. It's not just why I work on it, but it's just an extremely, extremely powerful set of technologies. And what I want to do is I want to get you working on and thinking about like these extremely high leverage types of interventions. This is pretty different than what the day-to-day that you hear about crypto and so on. And now I will connect these ideas to very concrete projects that you can. I want to talk a little bit about capital and how capital works and why, first of all, it's kind of crypto's big application currently. But I just want to give you some intuitions as to kind of why this is like a key piece. And I'm kind of motivated a little bit by first off thinking about today we have pretty inadequate government systems relative to where technology is going. You saw in that in the video that I just showed, like lots of different kinds of technologies are coming. I really think that we're in this super critical, crazy century where there's like this major phase transition that life and intelligence are going through. Like if you like don't 10 years ago I couldn't show this slide. Like 10 years ago this was like crazy. Oh man, AI is never gonna happen. Like AGI is not gonna come this century. And a few of us had to be like, no, it very likely will come this century, and it's actually like relatively close. A few people that understood that went and made DeepMind. A few other people, once they realized, oh shit, the DeepMind people are doing this. Oh man, we got to go and make OpenAI. And now, like the world has updated, and probably AGI is somewhere here. Anytime, I would not be surprised if it's here already. I would not be surprised, in 0 years. I would not be surprised also if it takes 15 years. But I would be extremely surprised if it took 40. And a lot of predictions have been fairly spot on. Not only is AI coming down the pike extremely quickly, but neurotech is about to really explode. So there's some major overtime window opening. There's significant openings that are happening today, mainly due to 2 or 3 companies. And as soon as those kind of get installed in a bigger way and start opening the barrier, the brain to internet barrier, you're going to start to see lots of reshaping of how the world works. The next one after that, which is not pictured here, is whole brain emulation, and that's further out. But I also would be pretty surprised if it doesn't happen 40 years from now. I would expect that to be like somewhere between 15 to 20. I think we're going to see some of the beginnings of that sometime this decade, but that stuff is coming. So all of this sounds crazy, right? The mainstream opinions are like nowhere close to this, right? Like governments today are kind of, the last 4 years are examples of like getting roadblocked and gridlocked on like whether or not masks like help with COVID. It's like, it's insane. It's basically a totally mismanaged way of running a civilization. At the same time, that same level of mismanagement is happening in our economic systems. We have deeply, deeply inadequate economic systems to do the kinds of things that we're trying to get them to do, to try to organize a society, to organize science, to organize technology development, to organize the provisioning of public goods, and so on. We have this deep climate crisis that is a direct result of the inadequacies of both our economies and our governments. Most of these systems, these economies and these governments, have been built up slowly through rule sets encoded in papers, in agreements, in these systems, these programmable systems through paper, right? So these are like extremely slow systems. What crypto does, the fundamental innovation here, is that we're taking these kinds of rule sets and making them software, which means that you get to deploy them into the internet at scale for fractions of a penny for everybody in the world to use. That's a crazy powerful innovation. It's an enormous lever. With that, you can rewrite all kinds of systems, rewrite all kinds of structures, rewrite all kinds of rules. It's super underappreciated right now, just the level of power that you have as individuals or as small groups to reshape the world with cleverly designed incentive structures. I'll give you one concrete example. The what I consider to be the most important graph in the entire crypto space, still to this day, is the Bitcoin hash rate. Is this crazy exponential. Every single year, people are like, oh man, it couldn't possibly continue growing exponentially, and it continues to do so. Staggering. It's at the energy use is at the scale of nation states. And all of that drops out of two basic mechanisms. One, you have a cryptocurrency, and two, you have an incentive structure paying people proportionally to the amount of hash rate that they give. And that's the power of incentive structures. You can use those same kind of mechanisms to rewire all kinds of other things. So concretely, you can use those things to, say, do something really valuable. So instead of like wasting all this hash rate in this kind of wasteful process, try to do something super useful and super valuable. In our case, in the Falcon community, we use it to create a storage network. Now people are starting to use it to increase solar. So try and get as many solar farms on the planet to increase the amount of trees in the world. So try and get reforestation to happen through it. I think those are like legit, very serious efforts that I think will play a very significant role over the next 10 years because they have this super amazing property of being broadly distributed to the world and permissionless and enabling anybody to join those networks and provide to create that work. So you really are playing with extremely, extremely powerful stuff, extremely powerful technologies, and you have in your ability a way to coordinate society to achieve extremely, extremely good outcomes. A lot of people today tend to underappreciate and undervalue what like crypto can do, and that comes from a lot of the kind of like the current size of crypto and maybe the mainstream like allergy that the mainstream world has developed. Like today, crypto it's actually quite difficult to like get broad adoption. Like we heard in the last panel quite a bit about that. I think that comes from these moments where because it's fundamentally a technology that enables any kind of like financial instrument or any kind of governance structure, you get these like super fast flashpoints where like something just kind of like takes off really quickly and then it's not well designed, it's kind of broken, and then like it causes problems. And so that has made a lot of groups like very careful and reticent to adopt certain things. But that's kind of like a matter of time sort of thing. People tend to think of like crypto as, like the mainstream world tends to think of crypto as overvalued. And I just want to give you a sense of like how wrong that perspective is. This is a great visualization from the Visual Capitalist that shows a bunch of different asset classes labeled with the rough size. So this is kind of crypto in 2021 in the peak. That's roughly where we are back now. This is kind of a military spending yearly. So this is kind of like gold. Like that to me is like staggering. Gold is a really cool metal. Don't get me wrong, but it's totally insane that gold is regarded as dramatically more valuable than programmable financial instruments or programmable governance structures. Like that is totally crazy. Then you have like things like the S&P 500. There's an enormous amount of value generated and driven by these technologies that underlie these companies. By the way, know that like all of them have to do with computing and AI now, and know that like all of this. If you take all of these kind of stock instruments and start transacting them in crypto, then crypto just eats that entire asset class. Then you get into like the global money supply, stock markets, debt. This is like insane level of debt globally. Bad when governments pretend like think that you can just arbitrarily increase this. That didn't work out so well for the Dutch or the UK. And here's real estate. Like this is kind of insane, right? Like, you're telling me that like the entire real estate of the world is really worth that, and programmable instruments are worth that? Especially if programmable instruments can represent all real estate? That's wild. And by the way, this is this real estate amount is like a crazy bubble, right? Like if all of that went to enter the market at the same day, how much of that would keep value? Here's like another crazy one. How many garbage derivatives exist here? This is insane. It's just like ludicrous to hear people say that when all kinds of financial crises happen because of this. And this is just the things that blow up. There's tons of stuff that happens that you never hear about. And the crazy thing is like something goes crazy here, and it's so big that it whiplashed the entire rest of the world, right? So something goes wrong here, and like millions of people end up homeless. Like it's crazy. And we have the opportunity to write what we want. That's the kind of like potential that we have. Cool. So I promised to talk a little bit and then open for questions. So I think now is a good time. I'll like maybe flag two major things. One is R&D can be organized through crypto. Think of R&D as like this long pipe. You have venture capital on one side, providing the incentive structure, the support, the financial support to be able to get something into broad markets. And in the early parts of research, you have government funding. There's this big funding gap in the middle that which is kind of why things are actually fairly slow, why we don't have nice things. Things get stuck in the paper pile and don't make it through to products because there's no good incentive structure here. There are no good instruments to be able to make this a rational step. And it's way too early for VC to play, and way too late for government funding to fund. Governments tend not to fund this sort of thing. And I talked to you about the scale here. One of the things that I'm spending time on now is realizing that the amount of money, so we talked about so this is kind of like the amount of money that the US and more. And by the way, this is kind of like why we went to the moon and why we got there. As soon as they realized how expensive this was going to be, they canceled those programs, and this is why we didn't make it to Mars. This is why we got fission reactors used for energy, and this is why we don't have fusion today. So, but look at that, it's 10, 20 billion a year, and that's the world's biggest R&D budget. The second biggest is China, and the rest all put together is like a 3 or 4x on that. So we're not talking about much money, right? We're talking about on the order of hundreds of billions a year, which again, if you were to look at this landscape and think of crypto growing into this over the next 5, 10, 20 years, we're talking about being able to fund broad-scale R&D around the world using crypto networks. Not through traditional funding agencies, not through traditional VC networks today, to dedicate a fraction of their supplies to public goods. Right now, the whole community in crypto is very excited about this sort of stuff. And as soon as those grow in value and they get to these kind of 10 trillion, 100 trillion scales, or decarbonization, reducing the amount of carbon in the world, you can do the same kind of structure. And people want.
I think the room, you can probably be heard fine. You have stick mics. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so anybody who would like to ask a question, please come up to this.
Actually, if we could get people walking in, and that way we can go question by question really fast. Yeah. Thank you.
Of crypto economics, but when it comes to at least the deepened projects that we've seen in the market, it doesn't really feel like we've gotten the economics part right.
Sort of. I think works right now are struggling with demand, and that's kind of what I've seen in a lot of them. And I work with probably most of supply side. But it's actually difficult enough that it kind of dosses the team. The team focuses on solving that problem, and they end up not solving the demand problem. And so now that we've built up the supply, now all of the teams are reorienting towards demand, and they are the demand numbers are growing, but they're not growing nearly as fast as the supply side. They're good numbers. They're just kind of lopsided because the supply is so easy to get with crypto. So I would, it's an open question as to can you come up with good incentive structures for the demand side? I think it's possible. It's just hardcore focus on the demand side first, and then knowing that the supply side.
Hi, thanks for sharing. I have a question with the Filecoin tokenomics. If you were to redesign your tokenomics today, what will you choose differently?
Oh, tons of things. And this is the kind of thing where always in hindsight you can spot a lot of things. I'm gonna add a huge caveat here of saying these are ideas that I would explore, not that I would certainly do this. I would probably invert. In Filecoin initially we extended the half-life instead of Bitcoin's 4, instead of turning to 6. I probably would have shortened that. And so instead make it 2 years instead of 6 years. There's one concrete one. Another one is I would have probably decoupled the protocol into more pieces and more components to make it more modular. the level of coupling has made it fairly difficult. And there's a lot of couplings in the economics themselves, and that makes it hard to work with. And probably a third would be put in the public goods mechanism stuff in place from the get-go. So like one of the things that I think is important for the Falcon Network to do eventually is to orient a huge fraction of the supply towards public goods. And there'll probably be FIPS about that in the future.
Thank you.
Hey. Yeah, one of my friends has this framing that I found very funny, which is that blockchains are just depend for nodes. And I think that a lot of the examples that you gave, which I think are very compelling, were related to capital formation and incentive formation in sort of a digital context, and then the actual change happens in the physical world. But all of the examples that we have of these are sort of very specific instances of this. What do you think general protocol for digital, online capital formation that affects the real world would look like?
Yeah, so I think, we've already seen a lot of that happening in crypto. Like crypto today, tons of people use crypto for payments, for capital formation of various kinds. I think we've seen a decrease in that because there's a lot of vested interest in keeping the current structures in place. I think that's a passing phase, and this will get opened up. I think what the world needs is right now, existing jurisdictions want to protect the current status quo, and they're uncertain about the future. And instead, I think what we need is jurisdictions that are bold, that are gonna create kind of the future structures. Think of it kind of like India leapfrogging the rest of the world by deploying cell technology really fast everywhere, right? So India did not go to broadband. They went straight to mobile everywhere, and now they're leaders in the world in mobile connectivity. And so I think we're going to need jurisdictions that do that at large scale. I think that one of the super promising opportunities here is Argentina. So as you know, Argentina has had super serious problems with inflation, and has had a ton of problems with its economy. Milei just came in as a new president of Argentina and is reshaping a lot of the infrastructure and creating this massive opening for crypto. He's very crypto positive, and I think we can get Argentina to create for itself a massive financial infrastructure based on crypto. And I think this is a massive opportunity that exists this year and next year. Probably will be gone 4 years from now unless there's some significant return. And so if I were kind of trying to think about improving economies and improving financial structures, I would go to Argentina and go to do this there and build a good foundational infrastructure for Argentinians that Argentinians can rely on, and that solves real problems for them. And I think as was said in the last panel, when you grow up in I was born and grew up in Mexico, so I'm familiar with an economy that is not very sound, and an economy that has corruption, and an economy that doesn't have the level of protections that you have here. And so it is hard for people that have only existed in the very nice top of, and super premium economies to really understand how bad things can get. And so I highly encourage you to go and try to look at the economic landscape of people in a lot of the countries in the world that do not have access to these really nice frog. And so my sort of prediction is that I think we will get all of this sort of stuff adopted by these countries earlier than we will see it succeed here in the US, because the US is sort of captured by a lot of existing interests that don't want this innovation because they're getting disintermediated, so they don't want that, right? So I would think of that. There's a process here around pop-up cities that is extremely interesting in the crypto community to go and kickstart some of these kinds of things. And so there's one in Argentina happening in August. Cool. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I think we better wrap it up.
Okay, great.
I wanted to say Juan will be speaking at Funding the Commons.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
this weekend. So if you. All right, we have one last panel before we go into our. So we have our final panel on the emerging landscape in blockchain, which will be moderated by one of our alumni, Spencer Farrar.
We can let the other panel start.
grab your microphone?
Oh yeah, that's right.
I can turn this over.
I think it was for
Go
me.
ahead and take that chair. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And Spencer will be joined by Jason Levy, one of the co-founders of Story Protocol, and Michelle Munson, the founder of Alluvio, and Chetan Nandakumar, head of product at Jensen. So thank you to all of our panelists. I'll let Spencer take it away.
No? Okay, perfect. Awesome. We'll get started because I have a flight at 6. I'm a partner at Theory Ventures. We're a $238 million fund. We're a data fund. We're thesis-driven. We take a concentrated approach, so we make 12 to 15 investments. Most firms make about 30 to 40. I cut my teeth mostly in machine learning and crypto. Started my career in structured credit. Worked at a hedge fund in New York City. Was one of the first investors in SWE or Miston Labs. Did things like Arbitrum as well, and then built an options trading platform on Solana. Let's see. Just to kind of give an outline, I think what's really interesting to me is we actually look to back, real businesses, and often I think in crypto, people are looking for utility. And one of the questions I get from many of my investors is, what can I actually do with this technology today? And so I'm super excited to have this panel because if I were to put a list of companies together, you guys would be right at the top of the list. So maybe it would be really, really great if we could just talk about, in the process of building a business, I think it's really important to architecturally design your business in a way that might be advantageous to competing against incumbents or things like that. And there are many, many trade-offs. So architecturally, you guys have all decided to build, using blockchain infrastructure. So I'd be curious if you could kind of elaborate on why.
Great. Is the mic working? Okay. First of all, I appreciate you calling us a real business because when I tell friends and especially extended family that I co-founded a crypto company, they immediately assume that it is not a real business, and so I'm going to cite you on that. Brief introduction, I'm Jason. I'm one of the co-founders of Story Protocol. What we do is we focus on the realm of intellectual property, specifically intellectual property of creative work. Think books, think movies. Currently, intellectual property is essentially trapped in a silo. They're trapped in little prisons. They're what we call static IP, static intellectual property. And the reason for that is that anytime anyone wants to use someone else's intellectual property, it requires a pen and paper process with lawyers and on a one-to-one. The internet, and much more recently with the advent of Gen AI, these intellectual properties want to grow and spread and flourish in a much, much more scalable way. So what we do with our protocol is we capture the intellectual property on the blockchain, just to get to your question in one moment, and we convert it into what we call a programmable IP in the same sense that you can think of money as programmable in the crypto space, meaning that the holder of the IP can set or program a set of rules that define how other people can use that IP. And I'm excited to share some examples of that throughout this panel. To answer your question directly, the reason this requires blockchain is that when you're asking people to trust others essentially with their intellectual property and say, you can go ahead and use our sort of precious resource here, whether it's in the crypto space or in the Hollywood space, and tell them about the advantages of registering on our protocol. To them, it's very, very important that they can trust that infrastructure. So when I tell them that even if we wanted to, couldn't change the terms that you've set, that for them is a really important consideration.
Makes a ton of sense. Thanks. Michelle?
Well, just following on in this same kind of theme, first of all, just a little about myself. I'm Michelle Munson, and I've been working in building protocols for content over the internet for quite a long time. And like Jason, had a lot of inspiration when I discovered blockchain, along with some of my colleagues, to apply its capabilities toward decentralized content distribution. And we at Alluvio created a ground-up protocol called the Content Fabric Protocol that provides for end-to-end owner publishing control, storage, and component-based distribution in a scalable, open network. And the fabric is meant to be, to Spencer's question, a direct competitor to traditional CDNs, like you would find from an Akamai, for example, or a Fastly, and a cloud media stack, like you would find from AWS's media stack. And the protocol takes some of the principles of end-to-end design and encapsulate, and then just-in-time retrieval, routing, and composite-based serving of media to the user into an end-to-end protocol. And that has a couple of key points, I think, for decentralized philosophy. The first is the utility value. The architecture of this is super efficient. It removes much of the resource used in creating multivariant file-based workflows. And if you know a little bit about video and have kind of followed how it's grown up on the internet, most of what you see today is basically versions of file stored media that's put through a more traditional kind of multi-workflow sort of pipeline. So that efficiency changes things a lot. Number one, it takes a lot of cost. Two, it also takes out a lot of resource usage. And then the other side, of course, is that the cryptography of the protocol and the relationship to an on-chain version. Protocols itself is a full blockchain. The relationship to that allows to the points that Jason made, so it makes it possible for an owner of creative IP to not only leverage and reuse their media, but also to be able to directly authorize an end user to it. And if you followed the way media has been on the internet for the last 20 years, it's nothing like that. To answer your question, Spencer, that's really important. It's top of mind for me. I'm about to go to the NAB show in Las Vegas, and it couldn't be more different than this audience with respect to blockchain. Most of the people there who operate major media companies and brands, they're either terrified of blockchain or they've confused it with a lot of the scams that have gone on, or they feel like, or the Xcelerator, we're deeply committed to the principles of this, is to be able to really manifest applications that people can actually use, that make sense to them, that have real value. And that is extremely hard.
My name is Chetan Nandakumar, and I'm the head of product for Jensen. And my background is that I'm actually a Cal undergrad, EECS. What we're doing is we are building a decentralized compute protocol for ML. So our long-term vision for the world and for the internet is that AI and ML is going to be a dominant user and player on the internet, as well as in all of our lives. And we believe that this is going to be a fundamentally different future. And we need a new commons for this type of future. And so what we're doing is that this compute protocol, we're using blockchain to build it, because blockchain is the only way to actually build a digital. The basic version is that it'll allow any AI agent or any person who's training an AI model and then return the weights of that trained model back to the end user. And so by making this a protocol, it's actually a kind of a deep conceptual shift. Right now, if you want to train an AI model, you would use AWS or you would use GCP to essentially train those models. But we believe that it needs to be, this type of infrastructure needs to be a permissionless, open resource. And if you just take an analog with the current internet, imagine right now if you wanted to send a piece of data on the internet, you'd have to go through AWS to actually send that piece of data. Well, we wouldn't have the internet we have now. The only way that the internet happens as we have now is where we have essentially a common protocol for information sharing called TCP/IP. And likewise, we believe that so if we had if we had to go through if everyone is limited through centralized entities, that world would be very limited. So hence the need for a digital commons around AI. Thank you.
That's awesome. I mean, so to me, what really resonates is you have immutability of data information, you have operational efficiencies, new frameworks that you're introducing. You're competing against legacy legal systems. I'd be really interested in understanding maybe some of the efficiencies that you guys gain from using these systems. I know, Michelle, you're seeing 80% gains in efficiency and 50x improvement in costs at times. And
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, this is really at least half of the massive opportunity. And some of this is domain specific, so forgive me if you've not lived in video content distribution for years like I have, but there is such a, let's say, inefficient and not content native approach to how this has been done. And because video is so big and so popular, there's been very little attention to changing that. And the Fabric protocol, partially because of its decentralization and partially just because of its innovation, the way it works, allows for changing the costs at scale massively. And I'll give you 3 examples straight off the top. So we are hosting the entire Sony Pictures library in the Fabric this year after 2 years of working with Sony Pictures on this kind of thing, because they realized they could use the same single source object to serve all of their title variants. And how much does it save them? Many X. And I don't know the exact number, but many X, because it was a big part of the calculus to decide to put all 200,000 titles that all of Sony Pictures has into this model. A second use case that's like this is one of our major streaming clients. You guys might know UEFA. They are the European soccer. After FIFA, probably the biggest organization in the world for soccer. And last fall, there were 2 reasons that we were successful with them. The first was performance gains that you can get out of this kind of decentralized approach that you can't get out of traditional clouds or CDNs. We won a trial with them on the basis of ultra low latency streaming. And then from there, they started to uncover the cost advantages. And now they have us stacked up for a number of use cases based on that, where they're really trying to just be able to do more with less. And then I want to say one more thing about the data side to this. Because of AI bringing, you're going to talk about, because of AI bringing so much data natively to the media and such a fixation on that opportunity, but then this inability to sort of get it into a traditional workflow, the decentralized architecture takes huge cost out of that too, because the data lives with the media. And that opens up so many possibilities to act upon it. And examples of this, guys, that happen all day long in professional sports are creating clips and highlights. Instead of recording the live stream and then making a copy, so you have a VOD, and then cutting a clip, right? Instead, you can do all of that in place with the data driving that in this kind of decentralized programmable approach. And we inspired the programmability in the Fabric from Ethereum programmability, basically looking at what smart contracts were doing in that domain and making a content protocol that does that. That's what I think real blockchain inspiration is all about. And it's quite moving in terms of what it can do. The challenge in talking about it is, I've found, and I do have to deal with a lot of mainstream customers every day, is you can't really put that in their face. They buy the benefits. They're afraid of the how.
Yeah, no,
repeat the question?
and I mean, makes a ton of sense to me. I think the messaging is something I think about a lot, which is an ideal world, the buyer is just using a better technology. And you're doing an apple-to-apple comparison, and it's very easy for them to understand. But I think maybe to kind of flip the question on its head, I think some of the pushback with like decentralized compute or actual training of models is the actual latency that's introduced. So maybe you could discuss from a latency perspective, or maybe even the workloads that you guys are managing and jobs that you're managing on behalf of users. Maybe it's a specific wedge or angle that you guys are focused on, but competing against hyperscalers on the supply side is an intimidating thing. So I guess what's your focus and edge in the market today?
Yeah, so using a decentralized approach certainly introduces some new challenges. And there's a lot of advantages and there's some new challenges. And with latency specifically, there's actually, when you look at training and fine-tuning, there's a spectrum of needs. So you have like full pre-training a model, and currently requires, for most models, a very low latency. But then there's the other side of the spectrum, fine-tuning a model, which can happen on a single machine. And we believe, so right now we're focused, we're going to be rolling in our DevNet probably at the end of this year or hopefully early next year. And we believe, and we're going to be targeting fine tuning in that. But as we expand, we believe that we can also target quite a lot more. There's a lot of exciting research happening. There's certainly recently a paper called Galore, which talked about being able to fine tune essentially a foundation model using RTX 4090s. And so there's, one of the things that's both exciting and challenging about the world we live in with AI and blockchain is that we're still really early with both. And there's so much blue sky in terms of new research that can really change what's possible.
Thanks. I mean, it makes a ton of sense. And then I was actually kind of reading up on that paper, so it's pretty exciting. Jason, maybe I think what would be really interesting to me is when you start to think about legal infrastructure being built on a blockchain, many people for a long time were talking about title being built on a blockchain or things like that. And I think what's interesting is if there's a dispute of some sort, specifically with copyright or IP, how do you guys handle that today?
Yeah, that's a great question. Before answering that, let me just give an example of I think how this technology may be used, and then I'll answer that question in that context. So last year there was an AI gen expert who took a song by Drake and a song by The Weeknd and used Gen AI to combine those two styles to make a new song. And he published that song on a bunch of streaming services, on Spotify, on Apple Music, on SoundCloud, and it starts to get reach, and it starts to make money. And Universal Music Group then filed a copyright claim to have it taken down. And when I look at that scenario, what I say is that this was actually a lose-lose situation for everyone that could have been a win-win for everyone. Because I don't know Drake and The Weeknd's personal views on AI derivative works, but let's say they're open to it. This was a case where their song styles could have been expanded to a wider audience. They could have earned more money. The AI creator could have earned money. The platforms that it was published on could have earned money. But none of that happened because there was no legal infrastructure to make that an authorized derivative. So in my view, what should have happened is Drake and The Weeknd should have, well, frankly, they should have used Story Protocol had it been available last year. And they should have opened up as one of the authorized derivatives. Drake should have said, I'm okay with any AI remix of my song as long as there's no hate speech and as long as I get 70% of the revenue because I'm Drake and that's what I'm entitled to. That would have actually been way better for everyone. And in reference to your last question about efficiency, currently that deal would have been a one-to-one deal between all of those parties, as opposed to any artist being able to set their own terms and anyone being able to participate on those terms. To your question about a dispute, one thing that I think is overlooked, there's all kinds of ways that we're exploring to sort of scale disputes. One thing I would say, or dispute resolutions. One thing I would say about it is that the current legal system, as much as we may want to look down upon it, it actually has a mechanism for doing this. And so the one that I just cited is that mechanism, which is that in that case, Universal Music Group filed a copyright claim and the current legal system took care of it. Now, that may not be the most scalable. And it's important to note that that scale is really only relevant when people make money. People don't tend to be so concerned about copyright claims or disputes when money's not involved. So that actually reduces the volume of sort of relevant disputes. But my answer to that would be we're actually internally exploring some really interesting ideas for how to scale dispute resolution. But the legal system actually takes care of that in some ways for us in a less scalable way.
If I could add something, because this is really exciting with regard to what Jason's talking about. Finally, the mainstream guys are really paying attention to provenance. obviously, Gen AI took them by storm. And I want to tell you guys this as a backstory anecdote. So there is what's known as an Xcelerator project across the professional media companies being sponsored by, let me name the names, CBS, Paramount, BBC, and participants from major tech companies, you would guess, like Adobe and Microsoft, and startup companies like ours, for example, that has decided to seriously go after content provenance. In this year of an election, in this year of obviously the Gen AI overhang of Sora and everything else, and for the first time since I've been working in blockchain, these guys are taking this really seriously. They are scared and they want solutions for this. And I think this is our opportunity. Here are the two things I've observed. First, I got asked to give a talk at a pretty traditionally video conference about content provenance. First time. And how you would do it cryptographically. And I did a critique of the C2PA. Maybe you guys should get involved and be an alternative to the C2PA. The second thing that has happened is that people are willing to open their brains to the cryptography, blockchain cryptography, on-chain versioning, authorization with decentralized trust, new trustless crypto. In my career, those people are like, don't bother me with that. That's too wonky.
Yeah. If anyone knows Drake, first of all, connect them to Jason afterwards so we can fix this issue. But yeah, I mean, I think with generative AI, right, people are taking provenance very seriously, and it's kind of a scary loaded gun that everyone's looking down at. I think what you kind of alluded to is interesting to me, which is it seems like people are more receptive now in 2020 to 2024 to these types of businesses. As you guys start to build out your businesses over time, I'm curious if your go-to-markets look any different in comparison to maybe a traditional business, or are you really just selling, underlying technology? Curious if you guys have experienced, any nuances there.
Yeah. So with AI, it's obviously there's a lot changing with AI. I believe that in the far future, we're going to see a lot of AI agents on the internet. A lot of folks are already talking about that. That's really going to be a big shift for society. But what I think is exciting about what we're doing in the AI space is that what we're doing doesn't require that. Is that we're hopefully our goal is to offer a better, a more cost-effective and more accessible product for anyone doing anything with AI. And so that exists, and so that applies to any Web2 company, any hobbyist, and likewise. And so our target market is really startups and hobbyists, and we believe that'll be alive and kicking for the next couple of years. And then, of course, as things transition in bigger ways with agents, both from the centralized perspective and a decentralized perspective, we believe that we'll be well positioned to support that world as well.
That makes sense. One thing I'd be curious to get your guys' opinion on is many people, I think, grapple with this idea of a token and how do you value it. Investors, traditional business folks, many projects are using it as an incentive to bootstrap supply, maybe in Jensen's case, if you were to do that one day. Something I think about is like a finance course I took here, which was like the cost of capital and cost of capital in funding businesses. And traditionally, equity has the highest cost of capital. And so within crypto, you have networks, you have tokens, and many of these projects, many of these deep-in projects are using tokens to bootstrap supply or interest in a project. But something I am conscious of is long-term sustainability of these businesses if you're using tokens to incentivize someone joining a network or participating in a business. I'm curious how you guys think about cost of capital in general when using tokens.
I was going to say, I can tell, I think, a very real-world sort of story about this, because the content fabric is built rigorously as utility network. The nodes participate under authentication and authorization as an address. They do everything in a trustless way. We took the trouble to make sure that the key management is also fully decentralized. Everything's set up, and there's even an LD flow internally. We put lots of work into that. Well, 2 points. Media companies and our buyers are interested in using the thing. They don't care about contributing to it. And that's a little bit of a surprise to all of us here, because we think there's perfect incentives. You could offset your costs. All you have to do is participate in that. And people don't think that way, first and foremost. I think that's one point. Doesn't mean it won't change, like all things like this, but that's one thing. I think the second thing that is interesting about this question is what's happened in the United States. So I'll just take a position here and say that I try to operate as a mainstream business. I didn't want to take lots of risks with the US government. I don't want to waste my capital, which is very precious, on lawyers fighting with the SEC. I just can't stand that. I already had to spend enough money on lawyers to help form things. And so the last 2 years in the United States for blockchain companies, if you are not forming an external entity, means that you can't even touch that, because something at least is going to cost you hiring somebody to justify what you did, right? So I think that's issue number 2, which we all know so well, but still hasn't changed enough or fast enough, right? So I think this is an untapped opportunity for us in the fabric. All of our mojo's going into use and what value it brings to the using companies, where they could get double value, being in the utility, being paid for that too.
I think, Spencer, we should probably have one more question.
Okay, great.
And then we'll go on to the next section.
Okay, awesome. Dreaming big, the world is your oyster. Ideally, all of your companies are huge in the coming years. What are you excited about? What does an ideal world look like in 5 to 10 years for each of you guys?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. For me, what I would love to see in the next 5, 10 years and beyond is, it might not be all, but the majority of content being registered on the blockchain so that it can take advantage of the efficiencies of this permissionless expansion. And I really see this growing alongside Gen AI growing. I was on back in the days of Napster and iTunes. I don't know if everyone here is old enough to remember those days, but this was the days where broadband internet was becoming popular, and a service called Napster comes out that allows people to share music instantly over the internet. And it's way better than going to Tower Records and buying a physical CD. But the problem is that it was illegal because you weren't paying for the music. And so the legal system starts to do what the legal system does and starts to take actions to shut that down. And only when Apple came along with its music store — I was at Apple back in those days, and then later Spotify and these other companies — were we able to take advantage of that technological breakthrough. And I think the same thing is happening now, both with broadband internet and more recently with Gen AI, which is that we have this incredible new way to generate content. It essentially, within a few years, will make anyone like a Hollywood creator. But the legal system currently cannot catch up. And when the legal system can't catch up, it puts a lid on realizing the value of that new technology. So when I look forward 5 to 10 years, I see a scenario in which we're taking advantage of not just Gen AI, but Gen AI and other new technologies, and we're actually realizing the commercial value of that because we have a scalable infrastructure behind it.
That's awesome. What about you guys? Anything to add?
I'm sorry I talk so much, but I'll say one more thing in response to this. So I'm thinking a little bit in Russian doll style. I see this sort of short, medium term, and then the big. The short, medium term for us is all about this utility value. There is a real stickiness in this right now. Media industry is really turned on its head to try to improve profitability. They've got to bring the cost down, and they're trapped with complexity, and it's really a moment to grow on that basis. And we've had a lot of success around that, and I think that's going to continue to be the driver for the next 2 or 3 years. But the meta driver is the one you said, which is Gen AI changing everything about creativity, and people waking up to the fact that all of a sudden creative work has so much more value. And how am I going to prove what's real? How am I going to protect? And how am I going to monetize what I have? And that's the huge opportunity, in my view.
For us, we believe that AI is a transformative force, and we believe that the best way to realize its positive potential is to really allow it to be unleashed. And we believe that building digital commons around it is critical for that to happen. So, so we're very excited about what's possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I mean, it's just an absolute pleasure to be up here with you guys, and clearly you're building, companies that are on the cutting edge. So I really appreciate the time and was glad to able to be on a panel with all of you. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today. And I think we have a networking session at the end after the BBX pitches. So hopefully you can stay around and talk to some of the audience here, because I'm sure they'll have questions. So thank you very much. All right, I want to invite up ZetaBlock. Yeah. So here at this section, we're going to have one Berkeley, one blockchain project that's been emerging at Berkeley, ZetaBlock, speak quickly. Then we're going to do the Xcelerator demo day pitches. And then we also have some RDI Frontier research fellows who will be talking for 1.5 minutes at the end. So right now we'll have ZetaBlock present for 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll go right into the Xcelerator demo day pitchers after a brief intro on the Xcelerator demo day by Blockchain at Berkeley. All right, thank you.
Thanks. Hey guys, this is Chi from ZetaBlock. I'm the co-founder and CEO and also alumni from Berkeley. And today the topic is about the data infrastructure for the Web3. AI obviously now is a very hot topic of the intersection. And why do I want to bring about data infrastructure? So everybody know that AI can be very powerful and useful, and obviously multimodal now is contributing to different things and creativities. But what's the secret sauce here is actually the data and infrastructure. If you look at now, Google right now basically probably handling 3 to 10 zettabyte data every day for us, and think about what type of infrastructure you have to build to support them. And what happened in Web3, actually, when AI comes in, that data infrastructure is actually more important due to 2 main reasons. One is, if you look at how the blockchain data growth right now at the moment is, I remember 1.5 years ago when I was giving a talk also at Berkeley, there was probably less than 1 petabyte data overall in the industry, but now it's like 10 times more at least than before. And for us, our data size also grow like 20 times at least. And another thing that is very important, that is very different than in Web2 is now you can see that your data is actually can be targeted by other people, because everybody now can see your power users' transactions and activities on chain. And that is how Blur is pretty much like really capture the majority of the market share from OpenSea last year. So then what is the 4 like main data challenges to block the AI adoption in Web3? If you think about like that's all honestly very common sense. If you think about what happening in Web2, that is happening exactly in Web3 as well. The data fraction, the data quality issue, and obviously the data infrastructure overhead and scalability issue. So if we take a look at what happened in Web3, actually now the data infrastructure, data fragmentation problem is actually more severe than in Web2, because now there's not only like Web2 data, but there's Web3 data you have to handle as well from multiple blockchains, and obviously the blockchain data itself looks a little bit different than in Web2, and you have to do a lot of like additional stuff to make it human readable and make it AI basically like trainable. Then if you look at when you handle the data quality, again, there's a lot of like a process you have to do to make the data really like a trustworthy, because without like a good data, the AI project, the AI model itself is not going to be trustworthy. Garbage in, garbage out is obviously every machine learning people or AI people know in the space. So that's why in order to really like make AI usable in the Web3 world, you can think of like a data infrastructure itself is probably one of the most important pillar underlying to really make AI shine in the space. So if you think about like what, infrastructure platform that can really make a Web3 data usable and make Web3 data really being able to be, again, used in the AI storm. That is basically what ZetaBlock is building, like a Databricks of Web3, but again, in the platform itself, it's already have access and to all the real-time, low-latency blockchain data. So that is ZetaBlock, and obviously we have been working with a lot of industry leaders in the space, including some of the people just giving the talks before. And thank you so much for today's
All right, so welcome now to the Xcelerator Demo Day at long last. I apologize for all the traffic issues that we had that slowed down our day. So what I want to do is just highlight that, this is our 7th cohort since when we kicked off in January of 2019. And Riddhi and Ganur from Blockchain at Berkeley are going to say a few words and introduce Blockchain at Berkeley. And then our leads from the Xcelerator, Keshav and Bell, will also introduce the teams. So I'm going to want to thank, RDI staff for all of their help, Blockchain at Berkeley, who volunteers so many hours to work on the Xcelerator, Haas, our mentors. I see some of our mentors here today, and our VC network. Thank you for joining. So we'll go to the other deck now. So Ganur and Riddhi.
Hello, everyone. Just to start by introducing ourselves, I'm Riddhi. I'm currently the head of external for Blockchain at Berkeley. And I am completely honored to be here alongside RDI. We've been working really hard with them to have our first ever blockchain innovation forum. So this is super, super exciting. And hopefully you guys have been having a fun day with all these really cool speakers and for the rest of the day and the networking. But I'll just hand it off to Ganur.
Awesome. Yeah, would like to reflect and kind of piggyback from what Riddhi said. We're incredibly excited and kind of grateful to be here and be able to co-host such an eventful and insightful day with RDI, Jocelyn, and Professor Don Song. A little bit about Blockchain at Berkeley. We have been around for a long time, actually, way before crypto was mainstream, and started doing innovation and research on Berkeley's campus, kind of originating from the roots all the way back from the crypto punk movement to now where we're kind of leading initiatives in education, research, consulting, as well as governance and design, on top of all of our external efforts. Since then, as well, we've worked with RDI to work on the Xcelerator. Keshav and Bell here as our managing directors for the program, in which case we've put multiple companies, many of which are unicorns now, through the program, and we feature as one of the #1 university accelerator programs that's also having a student fellows program, which Blockchain at Berkeley provides. So a little bit about BAB, as I mentioned. We really like to call ourselves the epicenter of blockchain activity, focused on young professionals and students, not only in the Bay Area, not only in the United States, but really globally. We've had an impact not only internally on students' lives, pursuing them to go into the crypto space or at least research and explore the industry, but also externally by working on consulting projects with crypto native and Web2 companies looking to transition into the space, conducting impactful and meaningful research within the space, as well as working on education, human-centered design, and governance efforts. A little bit about us, as I mentioned before, we've scaled very, very quickly, akin to the space itself, to make sure that we're making as much real-world impact as we can. As we can see, right, we host decals here on campus, as well as our edX courses through our education program. We prioritize our consulting projects with externally facing companies. We have a very new design team that's working on project work, branding and marketing for the firm, as well as some UX research projects. As y'all have heard in today's panels, design tends to be one of the roadblocks in mainstream adoption, and so we're definitely prioritizing this department. Research is an ongoing effort, from our governance stakes to our open source research projects. Our internal department, again, focuses on the club itself, while Riddhi leads the external department, making sure that we're providing real-world impact and really including the Bay Area community, the US, as well as globally, into the blockchain activity here on campus. And this is probably one of my favorite slides, kind of the like the emerald within our crown, in regards to what our alumni have been able to do, equipped with the education and impact that we make within this club. Not only have we seen our alumni enter the crypto space, working for impactful companies and kind of working at the forefront of the industry within blockchain, but what I like to highlight more is our startups. As I mentioned, Blockchain at Berkeley works on the foundation of some really smart and innovative individuals, founders from Alio, Osmosis, Evmos, Relentlo, Decrypt Capital, and Open. We really have a foundation to build off of, and that's what we try to do every day, really take it from which level we are at to the next level. Awesome, and I think really if you don't have any other further words, I'll hand it off to Keshav and Bell. But thank you guys for your time, appreciate it.
Hello everyone, my name is Belle Tankoptanon, and as Gurnor and Riddhi mentioned, I'm the co-managing director for this year's cohort.
Hello everyone, my name is Keshav. I'm a junior at Berkeley as well, and I'm the co-managing student director of the Berkeley Blockchain Xcelerator.
Yeah, and first of all, I would like to, give a shout out to our fellows, Derek, Akshat, Tanay, Tommy, Aryan, Matthew, Rohan, and Verdun for all of their hard work. They have been assigned to their respective startup cohorts and have been really, really active in helping the team. And all of these students are also a part of Blockchain at Berkeley, where they have their, it might be consulting, developers, or design teams. So they have been contributing to the cohort startups as much as they can. And yeah, we're really excited to present to you guys the demo day for this year. Just to go through a few pitch logistics. So first of all, each team has approximately 3 minutes, and some of our remote teams have also submitted a video. We'll then be having team tabling and Q&A and reception to follow right afterwards, where you guys can ask questions and interact with our teams.
So for this cohort, we're really proud to announce that we have a cohort of 10 teams ranging from infrastructure, DeFi, NFTs, token gating solutions, all the way to ZKP solutions. And we're really excited to have them present at our demo day today. But before we go into the pitches, we would also like to thank our faculty advisors, Jocelyn, as well as the whole BBX operations team who worked behind the scenes to actually make this demo day as well as the cohort possible. And in addition to that, we would also like to thank Nick Friedland, who is the operations lead at the Berkeley Blockchain Xcelerator, who might have directly interacted with the teams here. He's not able to be here today, but he's been a strong backbone of the program. So without further ado, we would love to dive into the pitches now.
So yeah, thank you for that we can be here. We're Loop ID, and we're building the digital infrastructure for the circular economy. My name is Christian.
Alex is here.
And we're a climate tech startup based in Munich, Germany. Came all the way here, had to shrink the washing machine to get it on the plane. And our topic is the circular economy, circularity. So for the ones that wonder what that is, we have to tell you the linear economy, as you know it, is coming to an end. The economy of taking resources, making products, using them too short until we dispose them way too early. And companies have to prepare for the circular economy. And they're already starting implementing the so-called R strategies, recycle, repair products, reuse them more, refurbish them, and to implement on top circular business models. For example, renting your products instead of selling them. So renting them in a as a service model, for example. And last but not least, they need to fulfill regulation. A lot of regulation is coming, like the digital product passport, from regulation like the Circular Economy Action Plan in the EU. And the challenge for companies is that circularity means collaboration. So they need to collaborate suddenly with each other along the loop, along the life cycle of products. And for that, we are building a digital infrastructure on top, a decentralized one, where we basically tokenize products like home appliances or fashion, build the smart contracts, use semantic AI in order to give them access to a common data and application layer. And you have to imagine that in real, that we basically put a physical link on products that you can scan to then simply access data of materials or even the life cycle data of the product. And to give you a real-life example, we brought something we built for fashion. Imagine a world where you can simply companies take back products. They already started that, so they're taking back their products for recycling, for refurbishment, for re-commerce. And the idea is that you could go to any partner store and bring back your shoes for re-commerce or end of life. And basically all you do is you scan your product, and to look up the digital twin of the product, you get it shown, you open it, you bring it to your retailer, and the retailer confirms.
So now I, as an authorized collector, take the shoe, verify that that everything is fine, and now this information is written into the token of the product. And now it helps to the transparency to have the idea of exactly who collected at what point. And this is just one example of all the applications and circular processes that can be built on top of it. And we cannot build all of them. So that is why we decided to take the core of our system and make it open source so that others can leverage it. You can simply take it, you can self-host it, and you can start building these end solutions or contribute to the core together, because most of this requires a lot of collaboration and standardization, and this should come from the community and not just from a single platform player that defines how these protocols and how this communication is going to work. So we are looking for investors and brands. Happy to talk with Christian. And we're in discussions with L2 for the first deployments or as an app chain solution, as well as collaborators or people who would like to build on top. Feel free to contact me at any time. Thank you very much, and pura vida.
We will not be doing questions, so I'd like to invite up the next team. Lulu Bit.
Okay, hi. It's on? Yeah, okay, great. So, hi, I'm Yanir, founder of Lulubit, a crypto neobank for Central America, the Coinbase for Central America. I think it's not showing okay, the slide, but I can tell you what's written in white that it's not showing on the screen. But it's fine. So Central America is a region of over $70 billion market in crypto and remittances combined. Despite demand, it is still a real pain to buy or sell crypto in Central America. Users are limited to expensive peer-to-peer networks like Binance P2P or Eldorado, or shady OTCs where you need to be a crypto savvy to use. Also, so that's why we created Lulubit. Lulubit is a crypto neobank for the users to safely buy and sell crypto from their local banks and also spend it with our crypto card. Remittance receivers are now paying up to 6% to receive funds from their home from the US to their home countries. With Lulubit, they can avoid those fees by receiving funds on chain, and we are fully compliant with all the local regulations. We launched less than a year ago. I really like how what's highlighted you can still see, so that's the point of highlighting things. So we launched less than a year ago, and we've already processed more than $4 million in volume, 1.1 million in the last month only. We have over 18,000 users, both in Panama and Guatemala. We are live in Panama and Guatemala, and we are starting to deliver the first physical cards to the users and to develop a staking feature for let the users generate yield at a better return than most banks currently do in these countries. Also, we are expanding throughout Central America. So we are, after exiting my previous company, I got reconnected with Alan, my former roommate, that he's a domain expert in treasury management. Then we met Diego, our CTO, who was leading engineering teams at Mercado Libre for over 20 years. So we are raising currently 3 million to become the largest crypto bank of Central America. So join us in building the next Coinbase of Central America. Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm Jonathan at Xbits, and we are building the decentralized compute protocol for artificial intelligence. The supply is very GPUs out there. So we take consumer level GPUs. For one of these is we're stabilizing GPUs. So 99.986% uptime for GPUs. And we are also innovating the business model. So we're leveraging value accrual to the token. So that makes us very competitive as far as pricing. It actually makes us the cheapest compute in the market. We're also deploying other mechanisms. We've built over 100 data centers in the past, and we've sourced over 65,000 GPUs in the network currently. Some of our partners are the Foundry and Render, who also contribute to our supply within the network. So our real competitors in the space, we see them as being the incumbents, AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, and we treat the other DePIN protocols as distributors. So we're actually partnering and supplying our resources and infrastructure to Akash, Ionit, Aether, Edge Matrix, Ritual, and a bunch of other DePIN networks. So coupled with our technology, we're also being very scalable through our network of partners. As a business, we've done over 205,000 revenue for the month of March, and our value proposition reflects that when we're servicing customers. So on average, we've saved some customers 72% off of AWS, and we've also increased our trading speeds by about 30%. Our team, we have over 10 years experience in cloud compute. We are also part of many accelerators, Harvard Innovations, Outlier Ventures, Stanford, and of course, Berkeley Blockchain Accelerator. Our team has also a lot of experience in crypto, as well as forming financial products in Wall Street. In summary, we're raising a $15 million pre-mainnet round to build out and scale out Xbits platform. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Fran, the founder of Gisa, where we are building actionable AI for decentralized applications. We want to bring AI into smart contracts, but Web3 is still not ready for adopting AI. Machine learning is a different beast than traditional software and has specific requirements. The main issues in the Web3 ecosystem are data accessibility and quality, where there is no plug-and-play data solution for machine learning. There is lack of tooling that is really targeted into the Web3 ecosystem on how to build these solutions. And there is problem integration, where protocols really need to understand how ML works and modify their smart contract behavior in order to have these functionalities. In order to solve this, we build this whole product suite to provide an end-to-end solution to build production-ready ML systems in Web3. We have Gisa datasets, which provide highly curated and labeled data from on-chain data, so it's plug and play for data scientists. Gisa Actions, which is tooling for building ML solutions without having the requirement of understanding how blockchains work, transactions, wallets, different architectures, etc. And integration, where we provide a solution based on a construction that removes the requirement of modifying the smart contracts of protocols to do this integration of the technology, and now protocols can just build on top without doing any kind of changes. We want to build an open ecosystem where developers can build all these solutions and spread adoption of ML in the Web3 ecosystem. For that, we are following an open core business model where we provide this whole stack completely for free, but we charge based on these more advanced functionalities that are required for protocols and projects to bring their solutions into production. And then we have the protocol on how to incentivize the whole open source community into creating an adoption of AI technologies in Web3 in the three different pillars that we defined previously. Tons of use cases or early go-to-market is based on DeFi, where we see high potential of creating new use cases for automated risk assessment, how to optimize liquidity pools, predicting gas futures, This is something that is currently not possible, and now with plugging ML into smart contracts, we can do it. We're working with very high-level DeFi protocols into this, but also looking with traditional companies on how to take advantage of this technology, especially in highly regulated markets. They are like very interested in using this technology. We like fintech, defense, communications, and even some generative AI companies like Stability AI. We are a team of ML engineers and data scientists, where I was the head of ML of Adidas, also the head of ML of BBVA, and I formed this team from my previous jobs into coming together and create this whole ecosystem of products to create adoption of ML in Web3. We're raising 15 million in order to expand the data science team to build more use cases, creation of the data team, expansion of the protocol team. And if you want to reach out, yes, email me. Thank you so much. Bye.
Hi, we're Sidechain, and we build creator-led businesses. Currently, whether you're a social media influencer or music artist in the creator economy, you don't make much money from your streams. I know this because I'm a top 1% creator myself with over 25 million annual views, yet I've only made $600 from existing platforms. So creators just like myself have been turning to new ways of monetization, specifically through selling a product like Mr. Beast with his chocolate bars, and through hosting events like Ludwig with his annual chess boxing tournament. The current solutions in the market are confusing, expensive, and unintegrated. We're using 3 to 5 different problems that just eat at our profit margins. And oftentimes, we creators actually don't make money off the events and products that we sell. So that's why we built Sidechain, a user-owned marketplace and social network for creator-led businesses. Sidechain's no-code platform works by issuing NFTs at the point of sale alongside any digital or physical products sold. Additionally, we give creators easy-to-use software to manage their storefronts and reward their members. We're the first platform in this space that is taking this vertical approach to NFT distribution, and we win because we understand what's needed for mass adoption. No NFC chips, no app download, and certainly no blockchain experience required. So imagine Mr. Beast, who has 200 million subscribers, launching an NFT community where membership is earned by being one of the first 100,000 feasible purchasers on Sidechain. He not only incentivizes selling out his inventory quickly, Mr. Beast will earn millions of additional dollars in revenue per month through royalties. In fact, we've onboarded creators of all kinds, from music festivals to esports games. And we've been able to hit $300,000 in GMV, and we expect $1.6 million in GMV for this year. We've also onboarded 20,000 users to date. So if you are planning to build the Amazon of the future, it should be creator-led, and every single product sold should come with an NFT that costs only a fraction of a cent to issue. That's 2 products for the price of 1, enabling huge monetary upside for both creators and users. And that's what we're building at Sidechain. My name is Gavin. I'm co-founder and CEO. I'm joined by my co-founder, Matt, and we brought our private equity and big tech experience to create Sidechain 3 years ago. But not only that, we understand the secrets to virality and network effects, and that's why executives from Yuga Labs and Coachella join, because it's the exact product and distribution strategy that's needed for mass adoption. And we hope you can join our other partners and investors along for this viral journey. We're raising $3 million to onboard the next 1,000 creators and 1 million users. So scan our QR code or see us afterwards. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Sean from Paddle Labs. I'm glad to be here to give a presentation about Paddle. So Paddle is building a decentralized computation network with zkFLG. So in the current Web2 world, the data confidentiality comes at the cost of trust and tech giants. So essentially, we send all our data to them and trust them will perform this correct computation. So actually, we have to pay for it. So But we think that is not the correct way to do that. So we envision a new decentralized and alternative where data confidentiality can be held without trusting any single entity. So within this framework, we can even think about that users can monetize their data as assets. So currently, there are a few approaches that can be used to address these challenges, like for the homomorphic encryption and the zero-knowledge proofs. However, each solution has its drawbacks. So either people has to trust the party who is performing the homomorphic operation, or there is kind of privacy issues if users just delegate all the computation to a third party. So our solution is that we can combine these two solutions very efficiently to get ZK-FHE, so to achieve a win-win solution. So eventually deliver this decentralized data confidentiality. So we actually spend a lot of time in designing these very performant algorithms to make that happen. And the whole picture of Pado is now building decentralized computation network. So in this network, anyone with idle computation power can join a network and perform services and get reward. Regarding to the roadmap, we actually launched our data extension protocol and products, and we are going to release our ZK-FHE protocol in Q3 this year, and eventually make it a decentralized network to support different applications. For the first stage, we actually now have 130K users, and the number is still increasing. So actually, our protocol is officially granted by Eastern Foundation, and was accepted by several top accelerators in this industry. And we do have a very strong tech team, especially in cryptography. So in the end, we actually are very super excited to announce that Pado has just closed a seed round. And thanks to the connection of BBX, we met Patrick from Dispersion, who will co-lead with Symbolic Capital for this round. And we also have Raymond from Sensor Next, who will be one of followers. And we are looking forward to collaborating with more partner and tenants in the future. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Our next team is also a remote team based in Singapore. And so this will be a video by Glacier team.
Data-centric blockchain. Our vision is to build a modular and scalable data network to supercharge AI and DeepIn. To begin with, I'm going to answer a question of why the Web3 needs Glacier. The answer is very simple. To realize the original intention of the blockchain, we want to store and manage all data in a fully decentralized way. And we believe each market cycle has its own narrative. In 2018, it was Chainlink with the Oracle product. In 2021, DeFi Summer started the on-chain data query journey. And this time, with AI and DeepIn technology leading the market, we do believe that verifiable computing and data management will be the key solution. So what is Glacier and what is our solution? You can see a simple structure here. We have 3 products. On the top execution layer, we provide Glacier database to help large-scale applications store and manage data on top of Arweave, Filecoin, and BNB Greenfield. And we have also launched the first ever decentralized vector database for AI projects. As we know, AI data is high-dimensional with complex structure. They require a specific vector database. And the third product is the data availability layer. Since DA layer is a necessary component in the whole structure, we provide Glacier DA for verifiable computing. So compared with the traditional world, Glacier is bringing the decentralized snowflake to Web3. Here's the progress we have made. Regarding the use cases, over 3 million on-chain CRUD transactions have been created on Glacier, and over 700,000 users have been using Glacier DB. Glacier Vector DB has been included in BNB Chain official GitHub and Gitbook as an important tool. Our storage data has ranked first on top of a BNB Greenfield storage layer. We have been featured in Messari reports twice and have been included in the annual thesis book in 2024. Glacier has received several grants, including RWIP DAO called PermaDAO, Foresight Xcelerator, Mask Network, Aptos Grant DAO, Stanford Hackathon, and we appreciate for the support of Berkeley Xcelerator very much. This is Glacier ecosystem. We have onboarded several AI projects, as well as many dApps from SocialFi and GameFi. We are working on a partnership with middleware projects, and we are connecting with different blockchains and storage layers right now. We have established 32 strategic partnerships, and there are 16 technical integrations right now. So far, these are our main investors. We appreciate for their support to Glacier Network very much. We have closed our angel round last year, and we are currently finalizing the seed round in April. So that's the general introduction of Glacier Network. Thank you very much.
I'd like to welcome up Belong.net. Jay?
Oh, we're doing this. Hey everyone, I'm Jay, the founder of Belong. We focus on token gating for events, communities, and physical property. So token gating is a method by which you issue a token to represent access that grants you access to a physical location, to an event, to content that you can pay for either using fiat or crypto. Essentially, we made this process very easy for people who don't know what crypto is. So they would pay with Apple Pay, they will process the transaction seamlessly, get auto-created the wallets, and then the owner of the property or the organizer of the event would get paid out in USDC, avoiding centralized banks or local regulation. The funds are paid out instantly, are not escrowed as with many of the status quo companies. No crypto knowledge is needed by the end user or the organizer. You can customize pass-through loyalty programs that will work around your data, around your physical locations, or around your events. And we can also white label and produce branded apps for larger venues and customers. We have a number of upcoming features that have already gained traction with beta customers, such as paid Telegram and WhatsApp chats, smart lock integrations that allow you to just simply tap an NFT on the door to open a physical location. And we're working on an AI concierge to enable discovery and a better management of marketing and campaigns for user retention and conversion. Our business model is 2% of sales and royalties, which essentially is passed through, and we escrow no funds, and since those are paid out instantly. We're also building out a variety of different referral mechanisms and marketing components that will allow businesses to benefit from strong communities participating on their network. We have more than 1,000 communities already on board and more than 12,000 events that have been deployed to the platform. And we're 9 team members that are full-time with 14 in total. There are a number of competitors in the industry, but we've always been the most user-friendly, enabling mobile access through our cross-platform applications and allowing everyone to participate regardless of their crypto knowledge. We are the only app on the App Store that currently can generate smart contracts that are pre-audited, allow minting within the application, and accept any payment method. We are serial entrepreneurs and founders building enterprise products for more than 15 years. We're backed by a number of prominent figures, both in the crypto industry and in community spaces that we are very grateful for, since they are helping us onboard their communities to our platform as well. We're currently raising a 2.7 million private token round, and we expect the token to launch within the next 2 to 3 months. Check out our application and try it for yourself. We'd love to have you on board. Thank you so much.
I'd
Hi, my name is Levi Rabalov. I'm the founder of Co-op Hive, which is the coordination layer for the decentralized future. So, looking to the future, most economic activity is going to be done by machines and not by humans. And these machines, these autonomous agents, are going to represent humans, their preferences, their incentives, and so on and so forth. And most distributed computing networks are not built for machines. They're built for humans. So what are we going to do about this? So these agents, they're going to need coordination. And we are building that coordination layer. Right, so coordinated systems yield much greater outputs than non-coordinated systems. And for that matter, by the way, we've seen what happens when we have centralized coordination, right? So the transition from Web 1 to Web 2 came with many downsides, lack of transparency, manipulation of public opinion, Cambridge Analytica scandal, for example. There have been many, many others, and people have talked about them here as well. We are building basically data structures to coordinate decentralized intelligence. So, so far, we have a two-sided marketplace for compute with collateral and payments mediated by smart contracts for staking and slashing. It was built for optimistic compute, but we can incorporate cryptographic methods or secure enclaves as well. And we have a very, very lightweight architecture that can accommodate many different use cases. That includes public goods computing, geospatial data processing, low latency AI workloads, supply chain management, hardware profiling, databases, and so on. What we're doing right now, we have basically 4 main tracks that we're working on. So we're making demos with our current code base, and that involves onboarding scientific workloads and building autonomous agents for pricing and scheduling. There was a bunch of research on this back in the 90s that kind of fell by the wayside that is probably going to be resurrected quite soon. We're also working on incentivizing the creation of decentralized RAG databases. This is quite popular right now. However, people aren't thinking about like the bigger structures, crypto-economic structures that we need around this. We're also working on the tokenization of latent computing power, and we're putting quite a bit of resources into next-generation distributed computing networks. So we're doing quite a bit of R&D. And so where are we going with all this, especially with the next-generation DCN? So we're building totally generic marketplaces that are machine actionable, right? So they're built for autonomous agents, not for humans, because most economic activity is going to be built for, going to be done by machines, but most of these markets are built for us humans. We're going to be focusing on decentralized human AI knowledge synthesis. So that's basically like how do we actually coordinate human intelligence and artificial intelligence to create things like automated science. And we're also building a pluggable mechanism designed for multi-agent systems. And so that involves basically how do you actually create the incentive structures to coordinate many different agents, and simultaneously what kind of data structures do you need to accommodate that in a very lightweight manner that is highly composable with other systems. Progress to date, so we got incubated at Protocol Labs and got our pre-seed funding from there. We're an early stage distributed computing network for Filecoin, and we're focusing primarily on the decentralized science space, although we overlap very, very heavily as well with decentralized AI and DeepIn networks. We have several projects development and several partnerships in development. If you want details, please talk to me in private. Right now, so I'm the founder. We have a very strong team. Basically, it's me and my CTO, who is an incredibly talented engineer. We have 3 software engineers, 3 interns, and we're hiring quite a bit right now as well. And we have a very senior advisory board with incredible expertise in decentralized AI, science, blockchains, and so on. And we're looking right now for aligned investors, so people who are interested in our mission and want to be a part of it, knowledgeable advisors, so if you know someone who's interested in multi-agent systems and mechanism design, please send them my way, and ecosystem partners as well, so people who might be interested in using a platform like this, which is basically a highly lightweight data structure for coordinating many different agents. And that's our QR code, and thank you.
And last but not least, I'd like to invite up Chloe for Auto AI.
Thank you. Just put my stuff here, and I'm just checking
Okay, cool. Okay, so hi everyone. I'm really excited to share with you our project that has potential to transform your daily trade and invest in crypto market. So our project is called AutoApe.ai. That's designed to help user intelligently aping the assets and every project as per their needs. Our vision is to become like decentralized agent network for internet-centric Web3 experiences. So due to the bullish trend in crypto financial market, there's a growing interest for trading and investing in crypto markets. However, the decentralized nature of the Web3 poses a significant challenge due to its dispersed structures. This presents really difficult for the individuals seeking to participate in this market. As such, there's the pressing need for the innovative solutions that can help address challenge and proposed by these ecosystems. So what we're doing here on our platform simplifies understanding navigations and executions for crypto transactions by providing the streamlined and user-centric interface. So it serves as the gateway to connect every users and every protocols and designed to be intuitive for newcomers and traders while providing one-stop solutions for their all crypto needs. So what we built here is an intent-based agent. It's made of cross-chain and multiple DeFi protocols. This agent will assist you to analyzing, matching, executing the trading strategies, regardless of the asset you hold and you want to trade. Such as the agent can help you to one-click help you to invest in your ETH, sniping the mint coin of Solana, or just saying one click on staking on Ethena, and also the agent can do one click restaking on Xcelerator. So we're pretty much helping and in the long run, we want to build a platform for the builders and the projects can deploy their own agents, the crypto agents, Web3 agents on our platform to using our the toolkits they have easily just one click to deploy their agents to us the tokenized decentralized silver for all the DeFi protocols in this ecosystems. And right now we're on the stage of our MVP on live, and then also we're on the seed round fundraising. And then for the most the rest of the year, we're focusing on the user acquisitions and marketing, and also the onboard ecosystem on helping more on the DeFi traders, and then users can doing more trading stuff on our platform. And I'm really proud of our projects to onboard. Already have the investor and also on the strategic partnership on us, like our Xcelerator, also MoonPay, the Coinbase wallet, and also Solana foundations. They support us as projects to building their DeFi ecosystems. And yeah, so on me and Chloe, so I'm the founders of the project, and also we have really the promising and then really have the higher confidence in what we built right now. We have our AI, experts, and also we have the serious entrepreneurship with the strong track of the DeFi projects, and also we have really decent the traders on board to build our DeFi product, the AI DeFi protocols for this ecosystem. And what we ask for now, we're raising the 2 mil fundraising out of the 20 mils valuations, and then mostly what we're using for the marketing, and then also for the research and the development for the how the AI agent will be helping user for their daily trading and investing for the protocols. And then yes, that's pretty much our projects. And then there's our official traders and also my Telegrams. If you have interest, just add on, and then we can just schedule a meeting and to talk more about. Thank you so much.
I'm really want to thank everybody for staying. I know it's been a very long afternoon, but we do have one more section that we want to share with you, and that is our RDI Frontier Research Fellows. We awarded funding to 15 researchers across the Berkeley campus in January, and 5 of them will be joining us now to talk quickly for 1.5 minutes each about the research that they're doing. So please join me in welcoming our first guest.
Okay, hey everyone, I'm Vamsi. I'm going to be talking about some new threshold encryption schemes that we designed. This is based on joint work with my advisor and a bunch of other people. Okay, so if you've ever wanted to encrypt your data so that there's a committee and only if a majority agrees, then you get to decrypt. But you might have run into some problems. So the first thing is there's like this interactive setup that happens, and it's like really bad. You can't even scale past like maybe 30 people. So that's one issue. And another thing is it becomes really, really hard to change committees because whenever a party leaves, you kind of have to redo this interactive setup all over again. So if you face any of these problems, come talk to us because we have a cool new result called Silent Threshold Encryption Scheme. Silent means nobody has to talk at any point, no interaction needed whatsoever. You also get time lock encryption if you've used that in your startups. And it's concretely efficient. I promise I'm not one of those theoretical cryptographers. And it's also going to be useful in like decentralized auctions, MEV mitigation, and a lot more stuff. So do come talk to me.
Good afternoon. I'm Danny Villarday, and I'm working alongside Ripple on the XRPL Zeki Bridge proposal and implementation. So you know the basic Zeki Bridge structure presented in the paper last year. It has mainly 2 components, the sender side and the receiving side of the chain. When it comes to the sender side, we have to generate a snark that proves the validation, like the light client verification. And then that's received on the updater contract. What problem do we have here? XRPL has no contracts. So how do we solve that? By treating header updates, the job that the smart contract does, as a transaction. So we'd have that as part of the consensus protocol, and the validators do the verification of the Zeki proof. So yeah, that's on the receiving side. And then what we've been working on these past weeks is on the sender side. We've been implementing the snark for verification of 35 SegP to 56K1 signatures. Which is a bit of a problem because it's not ZKP friendly, but we've by using a recent paper called Snarkfold, we've been able to achieve really good results with a 10-second proof generation time, a negligible folding time, and constant proof size and verification time. So thank you very much for that.
So hi everyone, my name is Jun and I'm a PhD student from Berkeley Computer Science and RDI. I'm very happy today to share our work called Enhancing Smart Contract Security Analysis with Execution Property Graphs. Despite considerable efforts devoted to securing smart contracts, the community suffers severe billions of dollars. So the analysis, the graph includes the information of dynamic execution of the smart contracts and about the data flow, control flow, asset flow information, and change the raw data to a more programmable and human-readable graph representation. With the help of the graph representation, we can perform graph traversal analysis, better manual inspections, post-mortem analysis, and vulnerability detection, and much more. On our experiment on history attack analysis, we adapt the solution to various attacks, and we can achieve high accuracy. Also, we discover some zero-day vulnerability. Thank you very much.
come from a slightly different perspective and background. So I'm a first-year law student, and my research is really in the intersection of blockchain, Web3, and law. Very honored to be among this panel of very technical people. I think this goes to show how RDI is, and the fund is willing to extend to really the intersection of blockchain with many different industries. So I'm trying to bridge this gap between what we see in Web3 and crypto and how tokenomics and issuing tokens is such a big part of everything that we do. And on the other hand, we have this list of regulators that's really trying to wrap their head around understanding, right now this is a security, but also wrapping its head around how to regulate that when it comes to insider trading. So the insider trading crypto space is unlike traditional stock market where you get a tip of a stock and then you. Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's unlike traditional stock markets where it's highly regulated, and we've seen some of that in the Coinbase insider trading case where an employee gets a information tip and then use that to trade. But what I see from my experience working in the industry is that a lot of insider trading and unfair practice happen more at a background, at an institutional level. I don't know if any of y'all here has worked with market makers, and some of them would promise that they would draw you any chart you would like to see. So I'm really trying to understand the space better and help regulators understand this space better. So if you have any tips, if you have experience, you're willing to share, under research ethical guidelines, happy to chat after this conference. Thank you.
So hello everyone, this is Xiaoyuan, and today I'm going to introduce another DeepIn project focusing on decentralized LLM inference, and I'm very happy to see actually today many companies are working on the same problem. So just for the background, with the growing need for the inference, many companies actually nowadays start to provide open source model inference services. And our project is aiming to solve the two key problems in the open model serving. So first, we want to solve the performance problem, which means that we want to see how fast we can get for the model to output the tokens. And also we want to increase the capacity for a given infrastructure. And second, we want to build a fair and secure on-chain settlement protocol that instead of buying credit card to, let's just say, AWS or something, that you can actually pay with cryptocurrency. In the meantime, the GPU miner can get corresponding incentives. And early stage results suggest that performance-wise, we can achieve human reading speed, sort of generation speed, that on an unquantized original model, that is largest model of Llama with 70 billion parameter with 8 consumer level GPU. And also we design an end-to-end protocol to amortize the cost by introducing off-chain signature exchange. And if you're interested, please consider joining the Slack. And also, if you know friends who need inference service recently, we're actually currently doing beta tests. So if you join there, you all see that we already have the web service there for you. Thank you.
Well, that concludes our programming for today. Thank you to all of you that stayed until the end. And we do have a reception still underway in the lobby. And all of the teams that are here from the Xcelerator are welcome to table in the lobby to talk to people that may be interested in having further discussions with them. So thank you all for joining us today in Berkeley.